Hey.
Okay, shall I find our user?
I'm already there.
Do you want to get
Wait, I think we can.
slides?
Yeah, do you want to bring around? We can.
Oh yeah, that.
Yes. So, yeah, we need to
Rename it.
And also, there's the other one as well. There's one that's like scheduled.
USB.
I think.
Oh, that's the one.
No, that's the upcoming one.
Oh, is it?
This is
the correct one.
Okay, so we should be able to access the email. But can you plug in USB?
okay. Live. We're live.
Okay.
We are live. Yeah.
That should.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
software.
yeah,
It's a simple task.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. You get it. Exactly.
Thank you. Here we go. Tech Talks. Download that. Very glad this already has power.
Is the live stream working?
Yes.
I hope you're not watching our emails.
No, the screen's not. So,
Okay, great.
Have the asked people if they're okay with Tojo's meeting this? If not, I can do that now.
Yeah.
Go on.
Guys, feel free to have yourselves some snacks.
get that on there. Yeah, things on.
I wonder if this is one of them sort of working.
Okay.
Maybe that's the open it.
Open. Yeah.
Oh,
No battery?
it's the battery.
What's another one?
No.
Oh, this was the spare. Okay.
I guess they have two that they just rotate about.
Yeah, possibly.
Low battery as well.
It's staying on.
Yeah.
Well, that's charging, so we can hot
Yeah.
swap the battery later.
Hello, can people hear me? Hello, everyone. Welcome to this year's Tech Talks. We'll give you a few moments to grab some snacks and drinks before we start our first talk from Dr. Dina Harbinger. Let me set up this.
We take a moment to.
Is it on?
I think my
Yeah, it says on. That's coming on. It takes a minute, but it will come on. Play on, lecture PC. Yeah. That's about right. No, I can always restart it. Marcus, wait, come on.
Yeah. Oh, we had it set to back.
Oh!
Okay, so we had that. So now we wait for it to switch on again.
Yeah. Always works.
It's okay, people got it.
We're moments away from beginning.
We are patient. Where? I thought Matthew was right here.
He was, yeah.
Where is Matthew? Am I crazy?
He was here. He was here.
Hey.
Okay.
Okay. Well then. That's nice.
I'm sure he'll. Okay, come on. Well, the lights come on.
Yay, it's getting.
Oh, there we go. Wait, are we able to like dim the lights? I can do that.
Yeah, we could in fact turn them off, like, or slide outside.
That's true.
Just turn them off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems fine.
Yeah.
All right. All right, we're all good to go now, guys. So you guys can keep getting some snacks and drinks. And would you like to take it away with our first talk for this year?
I'm using the mic. I guess I'll just hold it, or maybe keep this one here. Yeah. It's fine. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Edina Harbina, so I was a bit close. And I'm a reader in law at Aston University, so your smaller brother in Birmingham. So as you can see, I'm a lawyer. So a few disclaimers. I hope this won't be boring. I'm sure it won't be complex for you bright computer science students, but the law might, and some of the concepts might seem not unfamiliar to you. So I'll try to explain them, not of course dumbing them down, but just explaining, bearing in mind that you come and you study a completely different discipline. So say technology law is sort of my area of research and teaching, and it has been for the past 14 years, since my master's in law and technology, and then PhD in the transmission of digital assets on death, which since my PhD has been my primary area of research, but I also research in the area of digital online safety, the regulation of platforms, AI regulation, and I teach in the final year data protection law and AI regulation, which are like two very exciting areas for us lawyers at the moment, because there's so many changes that you may have heard of or not, but AI is being regulated increasingly across the globe, and here in the UK a bit less, but in the EU, just as information not very relevant here, but 2 days ago, European Parliament has approved the first AI Act that aims to regulate artificial intelligence at a horizontal level, so different applications, high-risk system, low-risk systems. So that's something definitely that you may come across in your work, and sometimes maybe some of you will end up, doing a PhD or master's and working on some regulatory implications at some point, or end up in research projects where we work with lawyers, HCI people, human-computer interaction, and others that I've worked as well in some projects. So I'm not alien to interdisciplinary work and speaking with computer scientists, HCI, and other disciplines, especially in this area that we call digital death, which I know sounds a bit maybe scary or not for some of you. It depends on how you. I'm also much nearer than the guys. But yeah, it depends on how you see death. So another disclaimer is that this might be a bit maybe concerning for some of you who have a peculiar or a more sensitive relationship with death. But for me, as you will see, it's quite natural because I've been working in this area for so long. So it's been, it's like, yeah, it's just a thing that I research in and I do. So again, maybe just the two of us know of this band. You might have heard of the Barry Could Show. Yeah, okay, sorry. But yeah, it illustrates some of the things that I'm going to talk about, which is digital legacy, digital remains, and post-mortem privacy. So this post-mortem world, the afterlife, the digital afterlife, or what we tend to call digital immortality in social science and humanities, where the scholars have been examining this concept for well, a few decades now, pretty much. So what I'm going to talk about is, the whole area, the concept, the definitions, and then some legal issues that I'll try to sketch and make interesting if possible. I know it's not always possible with the law. And then I'll show you some laws today that to an extent regulate this area, but not perfectly. And then some ideas as to what could happen and what we could do, not just in terms of the law, but also technology. And that's where you guys could come in as well in the future with some interesting solutions. So has anyone seen this series? Yes, what is this?
Black Mirror.
Black Mirror, which episode?
It's
On the screen. It's written. Okay, be right back.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you know what's going on pretty much in this episode, and that illustrates my research area really well. So, so this person, the deceased partner of Martha's, he returns from the dead in the form first of the data and sort of a chatbot that was built based on his social media profiles, communications, and other data that was accessible. And then afterwards, he also comes back in the form of a humanoid robot with really faithful representation, physical, and the algorithmic representation, data representation of the deceased. And then, of course, as it is in fiction and in the series, it raises various questions, including ethical, but also emotional and personal, and for me, legal issues. So if you haven't seen it, as any Black Mirror episode, it's a great series, and for especially you guys and myself, that's quite fun. So has anyone come across either of these services in some form? Yes, some notes. Okay. So this is an example of the MyHeritage, where it's like not a it's not a chatbot or any form of digital immortality. It's just like reviving the deceased in this very limited form, which again raised some legal issues around the image of the deceased, dignity, privacy, post-mortem, etc., personal data that is used without the consent of the deceased by the family members or someone close to them. There's also the Hereafter AI, more recent service, where the service offers you to train, again, an algorithm that would then be accessible to your family members and answer their questions and interact with them post-mortem. And the third one is a Somnium space within the metaverse, where again, avatars are offered an opportunity to live post-mortem for a certain period of time for a small fee. So all of these are a sort of examples of a limited forms of post-mortem existence or immortality. And there are various others. These are just some of the examples that I've used. And there's this interesting interview, quite recent, I think, few months ago, maybe, by Ray Kurzweil, who I'm sure you've heard of. And he talked about the reincarnation of the dead through technology, and it's been in the news that the whole topic of the reincarnation through AI mostly, and different forms of chatbot, generative AI, LLMs, and things that you guys know much better or will know much better than I do, depending on your level of study. But it is a topic that interests the media as well, and these forms of reincarnations in the forms of ghost bots that are trained either by the deceased themselves before they die, or by someone else, or for the access to someone's data and then continued existence post-mortem of the deceased. We termed in my co-authors and I in one of our papers that is open access. So if you're interested, you may want to read it on ghost bots. So it's called Regulating Ghost Bots. So we call these reincarnations ghost bots. And we raise these different legal, emotional, and ethical concerns. And for us, of course, as lawyers, the legal ones are the most interesting ones. So ownership in terms of the ownership of different aspects of one's identity, including data. But data is a bit problematic because legally speaking, data cannot be owned in law. They're not object of property. Okay, so that's quite clearly established in the case law everywhere in the world, even in the US, where there have been some attempts in scholarship to try and propertize data, and there are various issues with that concept that you might also think of as computer science students, but we also with restricting access, but also propertizing one's identity, propertizing something that we see as very personal, commodification of one's personality, identity, etc. So those are some of the issues that I just wanted to briefly sketch and show it in relation to these ghost bots, as we call them. But let's move on to something that is less, perhaps, at least for us lawyers, less sci-fi. For you guys, none of this is sci-fi. But when you talk to lawyers, even the technology that is a decade old seems very new. So it's all about perceptions and how you work with technology and how you understand it. And so digital assets is something that I've defined in my PhD and looked at and used case studies, emails, social media accounts, and virtual worlds and items in virtual worlds and games. And where I sort of examined whether those could be propertized, should be propertized, and then as a consequence passed on someone's death, bequeathed in a will or inherited in some form. So I've moved on from that definition of digital assets to talk about digital remains. Because when we talk about assets, we often mean something that has economic value. We think of, assets that you can sell, especially in the legal sense or economic sense. And then especially the example that I've given you of ghost bots or robots or bots of the deceased, we don't really want to think about those remains in terms of assets. So we broadened this concept in this research to call them digital remains. So to include not just assets such as something that you could sell, or virtual currency, or something that you could freely trade online and that you leave on death, but also your personal communications, your personal data, aspects of your identity in many forms. So I argue that shouldn't be included in this definition of digital assets, but digital remains, and that includes personal monetary assets and data. Okay, and reincarnations of the deceased that I've introduced at the beginning. So what is one of the main issues in this area when we talk about the digital remains and their access on death and transmission on death? And there have been court cases here in the UK, in Germany, in the US, where people mostly wanted to access someone's Facebook account or Apple account to access either photos or photo library of a family or private communications, and they were successful in most cases. And I'd argue that the courts didn't really make good decisions in those cases, especially allowing access to private communications. But what lawyers often think when we think about, anything that has to do with succession and probate and wills, we ask, is there ownership in those assets or remains? And if there is ownership, if those are property objects, then we can control them. We can sell them, we can control them in terms of possession, but also bequeath them and leave them in a will, or our heirs are able to access them. And for a lot of these remains, such as social media accounts and private communications accounts, there isn't ownership, as you probably know, in those. And one of the reasons are contracts or terms of service that end on death and provide you just with a license, like with many other accounts, your Spotify if you're using, or some other music streaming service, or video streaming service, and other services that are mainstream services. Okay, I understand that many of you might not use those mainstream services, but when we are talking about how we regulate things in law, we don't look at exceptions so much. Like, you guys who are aware, you might not be using those because they're big corporations and they're not open source, or whatever sort of reason you have. But we're looking at the majority of users that are actually using those services and how we can help them, and what rules apply to these. So that's just a bit of a explanation why we refer to these big companies and these often terrible services that have such a massive user base. So there isn't control in them, there isn't ownership, and that's one of the biggest problems. And now this is quite, again, a very technical legal issue, but it's something to show you that the law is quite a rigid discipline and traditionalist, and it doesn't change a lot in centuries and decades, and doesn't follow technology and developments, as you are probably well aware. But there are some proposals currently in the UK by the Law Commission that sort of proposes law reforms to introduce a third category of property. And that third category of property would be related to cryptocurrencies and crypto token, because the argument is that those wouldn't fit within the two predominant types of property, like things in possession, which is your car, or things in action, which is a debt or copyright or something similar. So here we see some movement where assets that are not traditionally considered or couldn't be squeezed within very old legal categories are being developed and proposed to be developed, so that that technology is sort of being addressed in technological developments. But just ironically, why the UK is doing it, or England and Wales in this case, is they want to be attractive for investors, and they want to be the forum, where these things are regulated and protected and could be object of property. So that's helpful for people to come in and base their businesses or their court cases in this jurisdiction, if there is clarity. But not to bore you with that, that was just an illustration that the law is changing. What I wanted to show you is not now in the domain of the law, but is in the domain of theory, and the theory that I've been developing and talking about in my research, which is the concept of post-mortem privacy. And this, as a concept or as a term, is not recognized in any law anywhere in the world yet, at least not comprehensively. Okay, so especially in this country, we have very limited rights after death in terms of our personality and the protections of this self, say, in inverted commas. So reputation, dignity, as I say, integrity, secrets, memory, personal data. Most of that is not protected. It's protected by convention, sometimes by custom, ethics, but for example, your personal wishes about letters or something else that you leave in a will are not enforceable because they don't relate to property. So there's this discrepancy between what you can decide in terms of the personal versus the monetary or the property. So my argument has been that this should be protected, especially because of these new phenomena, such as the reincarnation, such as all not just the volume, but the quality of the data that we leave in the digital world in different places. And I argue that it's qualitatively different from what we had before, which were just personal letters that were quite limited, in their quantities and their effects. Here you've got most people will have private communication with hundreds or potentially thousands of people that could be then accessed if someone is granted access to those accounts. So I argue that should be protected, and people should have the right to express their wish with regards to these very identity and personality related interests for some period of time after death. Not indefinitely, of course, because that would be quite difficult to enforce and difficult to implement. But yeah, a limited protection, I argue, is quite important. And this is a bit more of theory that, again, I'll just keep very, very briefly, where again, I argue that the post-mortem privacy could be developed even further into post-mortal privacy that would protect our informational body. And informational body is concept from philosophy of technology, and Professor Luciano Floridi is one of the leading figures in this area. So I built on that and developed this legal proposition and argument that, again, these aspects of personality should and do deserve a protection, and this is what it looks like. So that post-mortal privacy will protect informational body, post-mortem privacy, personal data on death, and what we call immortality by proxy or immortality mediated through technology. So that's, in essence, like really briefly now explained here. Okay, so moving on to the law, and I know this is now too much detail, perhaps, but just to summarize something that might be interesting, which is human rights and the right to privacy that is established in Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights. And luckily, we are still party of that convention because, yeah, still, I know. There were some attempts to scrap the convention and introduce the UK Bill of Rights, which is a terrible idea. But we are party of this convention because I'm not sure if you know, but because that's convention is a part of another organization. It's not the EU, it's the European Council, that is a wider organization, including 47 member states, including my home country that's not in the EU either, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Albania, Serbia, Turkey, even Russia. So, so that's European Convention of Human Rights. We are part of it. Article 8, also established in our Human Rights Act, protects privacy. However, it doesn't protect privacy after death, at least not directly. It protects it indirectly if the deceased violation, for example, of deceased image or dignity violates privacy of their family. Say someone defames the deceased, or there were cases where the deceased were accused that they were not a Nazi supporter, or a Nazi soldiers in the Second World War, and they were decided if that was a wrong accusation, that was harming their surviving family members, and by indirectly this privacy was protected, and family familial privacy. So that's a very limited protection. So it doesn't offer any protection for privacy of the deceased directly. So that's just a limitation. In terms of personal data post-mortem, I'm sure everyone has heard of GDPR. Is there someone who has never heard of GDPR? Show your face. Okay. So that's probably one of the most successful statutes in terms of its PR in the world. Because, of course, it affects everyone and all our activities. We are signing and consenting and agreeing to all sorts of data collections online and offline all the time. So General Data Protection Regulation protects processing of personal data and personal data of individuals. And we have retained GDPR in the UK since Brexit. Again, I argue luckily, but the government is now changing bits of this law at the moment. It's in the parliament, not radically, again, luckily, but some aspects will be changed to enable innovation and businesses. Yes, that's the whole premise of a huge package of technology law changes in this country. Just not stifling innovation with these bureaucratic laws that the EU has, but we've got better laws that will enable, technology to flourish even further. And we're going to be a global leader in AI and many other areas. I know. So GDPR, yeah, it's crazy. GDPR doesn't protect personal data of the deceased. Again, bad news for my research or my arguments. But it does leave, as you can see in this recital, member states may legislate to protect personal data postmortem, and many member states of the EU have decided to do that, exactly that. So France, for example, Hungary, Denmark, Spain, Portugal. But the problem is that all of these countries have made very different decisions and legal provisions. So some of them say protect personal data for 30 years postmortem. Others give access or give heirs the ability to use data subject rights, such as, the right to a deletion or the right to access personal data, the right to object, and some other rights that exist in GDPR. So basically, GDPR created a crazy, a very diverse situation for the personal data of the deceased in the EU. And I argue, again, that's not helpful even for the EU itself, because, it doesn't contribute to what we call legal certainty or harmonization. And GDPR has harmonized data protection quite a lot within the EU, but not in this aspect when it comes to personal data. Okay. Okay. Even more law here. Apologies. This is just a classification of what some countries have done when it comes to digital legacies. And some have decided, like Germany, that we should treat all digital legacy same as normal wealth and legacy, physical traditional legacy. So succession laws apply, heirs step into the shoes of the deceased, therefore they can inherit all the contracts, all of your accounts and everything else that they would inherit normally. And I argue that that's not a good approach for the reasons I've told you, and for the reasons of post-mortem privacy protections and those other interests that I mentioned. Quasi-property regime is sort of similar, but more similar to copyright. So treating a digital legacy as property for a certain period of time on death, like copyright is protected for 70 years post-mortem. So that's a similar solution. Post-mortem privacy regime has been adopted in France and weirdly in the US to an extent, where in a way, yes, the US is infamous for not having comprehensive privacy data protection laws, at least at the federal level. California has done a little bit more with their recent statute. But in terms of this area, they have passed a model law that most states have adopted, where if a user uses online tools to dispose of their accounts, they're recognized, and that takes priority over their will. So if you set up some digital estate planning tool, some legacy locker, or some other form of disposition online, that would be recognized in the US states, and similarly in France. And again, this is really weird because those legal systems differ so much, and yet they have quite a similar solution in this particular area. And no response is England and Wales. And why I say England and Wales? Because of the jurisdictional issues. So Scotland has a different legal system, their mixed legal system with civil and common law, and England and Wales are just common law purely. So succession is one of the areas that and property and contracts that differ quite a lot between Scotland and England and Wales. So that makes things even more complicated. So here I've just cached a few what I call in-service solutions, where the companies have developed these tools to allow users to decide as to what happens to their accounts on death, whether you could decide that they're deleted or they're passed on to some of the beneficiaries, some of the content, and they're different options, but essentially quite similar based on this digital legacy a legacy contact approach. Has anyone used or seen any of these? Yes, which ones?
Google's inactive account.
Okay, great. You guys as well? Great. Apple's legacy contact.
I've seen a tribute account, but it wasn't for someone who's actually dead.
Oh, okay. Why?
I'm not sure what happened, but I just remember someone posting on Twitter logging into Instagram and finding the account with some tribute zones.
Oh, right. So that was reported. They were probably reported as being
Yeah.
dead to Instagram or Facebook, and
Yeah.
then the account was swinging to tribute. Yeah, that. Yeah. Okay. The revenge tribute. revenge porn to revenge tribute. Okay. So yeah. So inactive account manager, I think, because a lot of us are using Google services. Yeah, more or less success. You can decide on a period of inactivity from 3 to 18 months. And after that inactivity, that's sort of tracked across your Google services that you're using when you're logged in onto your account. Google will assume that you are dead or missing in the desert. You know, if you haven't used the service for 18 months, well, that triggers the service, the inactive account manager, and you can decide on deletion, like I did, delete everything, or you can leave some of the content to some of your beneficiaries, friends, and family members. And as you can imagine, or not, this can conflict with the law and what actually happens in succession. Because if your partner is your heir, and you've left your Google photos to your lover or your friend, that they could come into the legal case could emerge, and they would be their interests would clash, because the heir would say, well, I inherited everything, so I inherited copyright, I inherited photos. Why did you how come you got access to these photos to the lover that she's never or he's never seen? And you can see that hasn't happened yet, but it's possible. It's quite likely it's likely to happen, but probably with celebrities or some rich person, because of course of the costs of the access to justice and legal the cases. We haven't seen many of those, so that's for me unfortunate, because I'd like to see the courts discussing this a bit more, but it's not excluded that it might happen. So I argue that services like these could be useful because they are tailored to the environment and the actual service and the content. They are not perfect and far from perfect, but could be more granular, for example, could be better advertised to users. Users don't have a clue that these exist, and whenever we asked someone and even conducted a quantitative survey last year, people really don't know about the existence of those. But I think that some form of legal recognition of those services should exist, not just these, but any other future services, and more creative or more decentralized or open source services as well, that would be recognized. But that's quite controversial for a lot of the lawyers. So that's just an example of what they look like. They're buried somewhere in settings, in privacy settings, not easy to spot. And well, the reason is, of course, that death is not sexy. You don't want to advertise death to your users, whether that you want to hook up on your network. Like, oh, look, you're going to die. You're like, no, sir, you're creepy. So it's not been advertised properly. It shouldn't be. So yeah, I've asked this question already. So it's good to see that a few of you have come across and used these services. So this brings me to some proposals. So as you could see, this is quite a unclear area from a legal perspective. There aren't many protections. There is a lot of unclarity for even solicitors and barristers that I've spoken with in my research through interviews and focus groups. They are not certain what to do. They come up with weird solutions like leave all your usernames and passwords on a piece of paper. Okay, or things like that. I mean, they're trying their best, but it's just that they don't know what to do either, because the law doesn't say this is a part of the estate, this is what you can do, this will be enforced, you know, this will be recognized if you make this disposition of your personal accounts, etc., etc. So there are really various problems that the government and the law commission and others who are in charge of law reforms have been brushing under the carpet for a very long time now. This is not new now. It was new when I started my PhD, but now it's been like 12 years since I started my PhD, and it's still not developing. So you can see an example of that where the law commission last year was consulting, and they, as I said, are in charge of proposing law reforms that the government then would or would not take on and introduce as an act into Parliament. They again acknowledge that this should be resolved, but as before, they keep saying this is too complex. It's not just a matter of succession and probate. It's also contract law. It's so many different areas of law. So it will be a separate project, digital legacy, and it hasn't been. So for more than 6 and 7 years since they started talking about that, and I've been submitting responses and evidence to their various consultations, saying, please, you know, we need some clarity. Things need to move on in this area and change. So what is changing is a European approach, hopefully. So I've just started leading a project for the European Law Institute in Vienna with a colleague from Switzerland, where we are tasked to draft model rules for the EU in the area of digital succession and digital remains. So that's quite exciting as a project. We will be working for the next year or so on that and propose a model rules that EU might adopt as, you know, something that would clarify there. But of course, we are not part of the EU, so it doesn't apply. Digital estate planning and tax solutions, as I said, I support them. I argue they should be, of course, revised and developed, but they come with various problems. Not just that they're not recognized by the law, but they're, of course, business models. They might go bankrupt. There are security issues with those, and issues that, you know, from a technological perspective, you would know and understand much better. There's also the role of legal profession, and so their associations, and they are trying to devise some guidance for solicitors and barristers to help them navigate this and advise their clients best. But another problem here is that about 50% of UK adults leave a will, you know, ever. So most people don't leave a will, and that again limits this impact of the legal profession as well, and their advice. So what we argued in the paper that I mentioned is that "do not bot me" clause should be inserted in a will as an enforceable clause, where you say, I don't want to be turned into a bot after death, or I want to. Okay, you know, fair enough. But that's an aspect of autonomy, I argue, especially for those personal remains, that should really be enforced. And another idea is this zombie AI, which is crazy controversial for lawyers, as you can imagine. But in essence, it's an AI agent that would be developed and trained on one's interaction with the deceased before that, or their data, and then that would represent the dead and help interpret their wishes and make their decisions. So this is a project, okay, and something that could be interesting even for the law at some point in the far future. But it's an idea that we've been thinking about with some project teams. So I don't know if okay, that was it. That was, I think, everything I had to say. Basically, that's my book. I know it's not your typical academic cover book for it. The publisher accepted it somehow. I don't know what they thought, but yeah, it was drawn by my friend who's a comic artist, and yeah, if you're interested, there's also open access sources and articles that you could read if you want to know more about this. But basically, I hope it wasn't too lawyerly and that you found something interesting for your own research and learning and work. And yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Are you on?
Have we swapped the battery on the mic?
No.
Can do it.
Which way round was it?
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, that's full.
Excellent. Oh, really?
Let's see. Yeah, this microphone's working now.
What's this? Sorry, I guess I connect this one to my laptop.
Yeah, if we unplug,
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I need to force it. Okay.
Would it be laptop in either?
give it a minute or two.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, I will get it.
Well, so we will bring one up as well. Good sign. No, they're regular. Already in spa bag.
As Oh, did that do? It's still the we couldn't say the news not has to be just I mean yes, I suppose it, but we don't know enough yet. Whereas if we go to the like we don't know. Like
I can look it up.
see what I was like I can just keep going on.
Okay, yes. I'm nickel for every time a lemonade is good, I'll have 2 nickels, which is a lot. I think pretty good.
No, don't worry.
Yeah, it happens.
I'm not necessarily there.
Yeah.
Sorry, pronounce, is it Gyeongyeong?
Yes.
Okay, everyone, we've got our next talk of the day from Hyo-young Kim about changing interfaces.
Yeah, thank you.
Microphone on.
Oh. I think it's on. Yes. Just need to speak loud. Hi everyone, thanks for inviting me. It's really exciting to see that you want to spend Friday afternoon listen about research. It's really inspiring and motivating for me. Yeah, thanks again for inviting me and letting me in. I was stuck outside the door. Yeah, and it's also good to see some familiar faces from the Open Visit Day and also and modules. Thanks. So during my PhD, so today's talk will be about what I did during my PhD. And if you want to listen what I did after my PhD, you need to invite me again. Okay, so during my PhD, I mostly worked on shape-changing interfaces. And what is it? So it's literally physical interfaces that can change their shapes. So with this device, you can use it as a slider, and once you press the button, it changes to a knob. So so that you can have two interfaces on one device. So you may think, okay, that's interesting, but what is it for? So let's do a interactive session. So let's say, let's hope the semester finishes soon and the exam passes soon, and you will have some time for yourself. So and let's say you got into DJing, watched some cool video on YouTube, and you want to learn about it. And can you raise your hand? Okay, let's say you saw two types of device. One is a tablet, like a touchscreen interface, and the other is a physical interface. So which device do you want to get? Let's assume the prices are the same. Can you raise your hand if you want the first one, the touchscreen interface? Okay, there are a few students. Cool. How about the second one? Physical. Cool. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Cool. Thanks. So, and then let's say during the summer, your family would decide to go for a vacation somewhere like outside of UK, and you still want to practice DJing during the vacation. Let's say you have both devices. Which device do you want to bring? The first one? Yeah, I see more people raise their hands. And the second one? Okay, quite a few. Good. And the last question, now you are the expert of DJing and you want to show off. Like you will invite people, your friends to your place and throw a party. You will show off. Which device do you want to use? Touchscreen? Yeah, there are still a few. Good. Physical device? Yay. Good. So you could see that you raised your hand depending on the question. Sometimes you preferred, some of you had consistency, but some of you had changed your preference depending on the situation. So that is because those devices have different advantages and disadvantages. And typically, as HCI researchers, we call it flexibility and physicality. So touchscreen interfaces have great physical flexibility. So for example, you can have many apps on the touchscreen device and the switch between apps or between interfaces super quickly. And because of that, it has many advantages. For example, you can with many interfaces, apps, functions on one small device, and it's easier to adapt to user preferences. Maybe you prefer like a green color over this purple color. On software side, it's easy to change. It's much cheaper for producers to make such graphical interfaces over than physical interfaces. But we also know that they are not perfect. For example, because the touchscreen interfaces are cheaper. Some companies, airplane companies, want to introduce it in the airplane cockpit, but you can see it's very shaky, and it's actually not nice to use such interfaces in the cockpit. And this can be related to safety issues. For example, there was a report from about the new U.S. Navy crash. So there was a crash and the incident, and one of the reasons was there was touchscreen interface, and it was a bit too difficult, like somehow resolve the issues and then have a full control on the ship. So this made me wonder, like, okay, so the flexibility is good, scalability is also good, but how should we combine both? Like, maybe, can we have a device that changes the shape? But as a HCI researcher, I shouldn't do it randomly. I should have a good reason or a good design requirements to design shape-changing interfaces. So I took the user-centered design method. So we started from observing users who actually use some control interfaces. Our focus was control interfaces like knobs and sliders. So we recruited 8 professional users. They included cinema operator, graphic designer, light engineers, artists, sound engineers, and pilots. So luckily, we've recruited all of them and did a user study and derived 6 design requirements. So I will give you some example. I will go through the design requirements we gathered from the user study. So firstly, they controlled a large number of parameters. Depending on their work, they controlled from 10 to more than 100 parameters. And they needed fast interaction. So for example, since the musicians never play in the same way, the sound engineers had to be very reactive. So to change some parameters quickly, they sometimes record some parameters and jump to the values by pressing a button. And generally, sliders were good at fast interaction because they have clear minimum and maximum boundaries, and you can clearly also see the cursor. Then it was easy to reach the max and min and max values quickly. Or they used the visual markers. For example, this cinema operator attached a red tape next to the slider to mark appropriate camera parameter value. So she observed the position of the tape and then moved the cursor near the tape. They also needed precise interaction. For example, this sound engineer used haptic feedback just slightly to change the value. And generally, diodes or knobs were good at precise interaction because normally they allow multiple rotations. They also needed eyes-free interaction. Look at this sound engineer. He's looking at the stage, not the interface. So in this case, the physicality of the device had the eyes-free interaction. And there was also, an opposite example of from the light artist. So he was using touchscreen interface because it was compact for him and it was easy to move around the stage and control the light with the tablet. But we observed that sometimes his finger went out of the control trajectory, so he had to fix his eyes on the tablet, put the finger on the right place, and then he could continue the interaction. And eyes-free control can be related to life and death issues. We didn't observe it, but some of the pilots mentioned that there could be smoke in the cockpit. And in this case, eyes-free interaction is really important to handle the situation and land safely. The 5th requirement was mobile interaction. So we didn't observe it either, but the cinema operator mentioned that she sometimes needs to change the parameter, like while she's walking around the scene.
The mobility was also needed for the sound engineer. He could, he could use microphone most of the time to communicate with the musicians while controlling the parameters, but not all the musicians had the microphone. For example, a drummer in our case didn't have a microphone, so he had to go on the stage while changing and also change some parameters while communicating with the drummer. So in this case, he put a tablet device onto the stage, and then he could change some parameters. And the light artist often moved from his desk to the in front of the stage to check the audience's view. It makes sense. So in this case, his tablet device allowed him to change some parameters. Precisely. And lastly, as you've seen, the interfaces you've seen were mostly sliders, dials, and buttons, and mostly physical. And they were quite used to and efficient at using them. And they wanted to keep their interaction method. So throughout the formative study, we derived 6 design requirements for parameter control. And then we had the question, so how should we, and we decided to have embed we decided to have embed sliding interaction and then rotating interaction on one device. And how can we do it? How do we build such device? We had different ways of ideating such device. One way was using some literature. Actually, it was also my work. I will not talk about it in detail, but so this literature suggested ways to design new shape-changing interfaces. And one of the features was modularity. For example, when you combine 3 pieces together, it can make a round shape. Let's say we can use it as a knob. But when they are splitted, maybe it can make straight shape, and then we can use it as a slider. We also use the reconfigurable daily objects as idea. For example, we can use the party, I would say, slap bracelet or party whistle as shape-changing interfaces. So throughout the process, we created 10 different designs, low fidelity prototypes. Well, when did it happen? Okay, I hope you didn't miss anything. So we had these 10 different prototypes, and then we evaluated them by using the design requirements from the user study. For example, so with this design, it will be difficult to embed physical cursor in the slider mode. So meaning that you cannot have like eyes-free or precise interaction when it's slider mode. So it was not good for precise interaction. And some design didn't allow quick shape change between the knob and slider status. For example, this design is very compact, and to actuate the shape change, probably embedding shape memory alloy will make more sense. But shape memory alloys are not good at fast shape shifting. So this design was not good for fast interaction. And then we found this design. It could have a physical cursor. And it also had enough space to embed motors. And the motors are good at fast actuation. So we chose this design and built a working prototype, knob slider. A shape-changing device that can be either slider or knob. And that's not the end of the story. We brought it back to the users and observed how what they think about it. So in general, they were okay. For example, this user is using the knob status to change the size of the Photoshop brush. So in general, they were excited by the device and told me the idea makes sense, and they hope to have these kind of devices in the future. very exciting. As a PhD student, exciting. So in the future, like everyone will like make this kind of device, and then yeah, the world will be full of shape-changing interfaces. So let's begin it. So I put like detailed instruction of how to build a device on the online platform. It's like a GitHub but for hardware. So I got some views, and the comments were positive. It makes sense. I want to try making it myself. Very exciting. And then actually I got to know no one like who actually built it, and also I had experience I failed to replicate it myself because in the between I changed my lab and had got a different 3D printer, and the shape we printed was slightly different from what I made before, and that they didn't fit together. So I had to change the design again. It took me 3 full weeks to make it again. So my conclusion was it's hard to build shape-changing interfaces, and that motivated me change my research interest to digital fabrication. So yeah, so it was a preview for my next talk about digital fabrication. But if you are interested in shape-changing interfaces or tangible or physical interfaces, yeah, I'm happy to chat about it. But there will also invited talk by Dr. Usama Vetela on after Easter break. There will be announcement about it. It's one of the computer science seminar series. Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks to my collaborators, and thanks for listening to me. Yeah, happy to have any questions. No? Yeah.
So what would be the next steps with like the design that you made? Would you try and make it smaller or make it easier to fabricate on a mass scale? So what were your plans?
Yeah. So for now, I'm more into the design tools, because it was hard to build. I want to make software or hardware tools that you can, I don't know, maybe just put some sketch, the shape change should be like this, and the software should create some design for you, and then you should be able to just 3D print it and be actuated. That's my ultimate goal. But in general, there are many things to be done in shapes and interfaces area. Not only about the fabrication method, that's one thing I said, and the other thing is about some usability or user aspects of the shapes and interfaces. For example, when I showed this device to the users, some of them were surprised. They didn't expect it's going to move, and with some, because the design is not the best, they thought their fingers would be snapped, and then they could be hurt. No one was hurt. But so we need to think about, so for example, what should be the speed of shape change that's suitable for certain interaction applications, or what should be the path of shape change? So maybe this kind of shape change won't be very good when users have to touch it, but maybe like, I don't know, something that doesn't seem like it's going to hurt people. Yeah, any other questions? No? Thank you.
We're full of creative ways of jumping over that.
Yeah.
How
Ordered ones.
mine's also
So we start the next one.
yeah, I said go for one more and then right. I put it back onto like the PC.
What's on the PC? Oh, this one? Sure. But that's also going to show that.
Yeah. I'm blanking it.
Cool.
I'm not blank. There
Stay here.
we go. We're still live on the YouTube.
We're not broadcasting that.
No,
We're not. Okay.
I blanked it.
Does anyone know how to move that camera? Because at the moment you can't see the speaker.
No.
There's nothing on here.
Yeah, I don't really want to.
Yeah, not now exactly.
I feel like we would do something with connectors. Yeah. You think
Yeah,
I
but-
can try?
No, let's leave it because Zoom quite difficult when you open Connector.
Okay, let's leave it.
Let's leave it as is.
The less we break these, the better.
We're not trying to break it, but
We'll put that on the
say hello.
Good evening.
My thingy somewhere. Yeah.
Don't stop there for that.
Right, it's the most important. Oh, of course.
I think we could do that.
No.
Sorry, I put my laptop there. It's probably easier.
Yeah.
Third by one shot. Is that plugged in?
It's certainly blank. Well, HDMI.
Shall I unblank it?
No, let me just set it to extend mode so I can find notes.
Yeah, I'm gonna sit over there so I can easily jump out.
Just realised I just put Coke in my coffee mug. That's horrible.
Was there still coffee in it?
Yes, no, there wasn't any like loose coffee. That's fine. I'm being cleaned over. Yeah, okay, that's all right. What? Who's Eblo?
Yep. No.
Slideshow. Oh, hell yeah. Ollie, did you give Chris this now?
Should we put that up?
Yeah, do you want to unblank? There we go.
Fantastic.
There we go.
It's time for delivery now. Yeah.
Head off in a second.
Yeah.
And we'll bring you in next time.
It looks like it's getting close.
This would be more like 15. That's 20.
Yes.
Go run and grab that.
Hello. Okay. Welcoming our next speaker is Sam, doing a PhD here at UAB. Take it away.
Oh, okay. Outstanding. Hi, yeah. Well, I'm Sam. I'm first year PhD student, and says there I work with Tom and Marius in the cybersecurity research group. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about anti-cheat systems. So, quick roadmap. We're going to quickly go over sort of my work and interests, a little this crash course in video games. I think this will be less important for you than it was for the professors last week. Introduction to anti-cheat techniques, a taxonomy/ranking system of prevalent anti-cheat systems. So that will include a tier list, which was also not for the professors. The effects of technical sturdiness in future work. Right, yeah, just quickly. I look at software protection, remote attestation, which is sort of how you can guarantee certain properties of a system remotely. Man at the end attacks, which you'll learn a bit more about in a tick, anti-cheat systems, and then I have some extra work on teaching reverse engineering through game hacking, which is my sort of fun project. Okay, so the motivations for this work are, well, there's a few. First of all, I like the attack domain. It's quite fun, as I'll explain in a tick. There's nice parallels in other sort of antivirus and endpoint detection response research, which we can draw. Little academic exploration so far, which is always fun because it's nice to have the first paper in a field. And yeah, that's it. Fantastic. Right, how to cheat. 1, get your older brother to boost you. 2, dope. I'm not kidding. Adderall, there's been research on it. If you want to go do pro esports, there's a fair chance some of your team members will have doped on Adderall at some point. Finally, use a software cheat to gain an unfair advantage, which is what I like to look at. As fun as doping might be. Right, common first-person shooter and I'll say battle royale and third-person shooter cheats as well. ESPs and aimbots. ESPs are your sort of wall hack cheat, which give you sort of supplementary information that other players wouldn't normally have access to. So, you know, seeing people through walls, seeing where the epic sniper rifle is on the Fortnite map. Aimbots automate the aiming process for you. These days are a bit stealthier than they used to be. It used to be the case of, you know, you'd have people blinking around all over the shop, killing about 10 people at once. They're a bit easier to detect now. So we have the sort of stealth aimbot, which you can actually see in this picture I've got here. So you can see the ESP in action via the people through the wall. And this big white circle in the middle is the aimbot sort of activation area for this cheat. So if you aim at someone in that circle, it'll sort of gently correct your aim straight to the target's head, or wherever you set it to be. Cheats are sold online because they're completely legal, mostly. It's a grey market. You can be sued by the company for copyright infringement, but it breaks no UK law. The sites look like this for the most part. They normally sell a range of different subscriptions, but they almost always sell monthly subscriptions. And as you can see, they go quite high. I think the most expensive we looked at was a Valorant cheat, which was £250 per month. Right, the attack domain. This is the fun bit. We classify this as a man at the end scenario, which if you haven't heard of, don't worry. They're quite sort of obscure. This is where the attacker has just about completely unrestricted privileges on the device they're attacking. So in this case, you know, it's your PC, you've got admin, you can do whatever you want. Unlike normal malware, where you don't want the malware on your computer, this time you're letting it do whatever it wants. Windows focused, I've got the statistic there, 97%. A lot of games with anti-cheats just won't let you even play on Linux, so Valorant is a prime example. There are some that do, and it's very polite that they do that. As I've mentioned, the attacker enjoys a sort of unrestricted space, and the defender gets one head start, which is Windows kernel protections. Apart from that, you're sort of on your own. Looking at Windows 11, which is a bit of my future research, there's some more things to help the anti-cheat companies, but on Windows 10, it's a bit of a tough job. Cheat should be distributable. If you can't sell it easily, why bother? Basic cheat methods. This is a very high level analysis. Reverse engineering. So first of all, you need to figure out how the game works. Then you need to you know, get some interesting things like your health. And then you need to change them. Yeah, code model injection, outstanding. Function hooks and detours, yep. So finding out how a game works, changing bits of it, making it do other stuff, and getting information out of memory for you to put into something like an external cheat. Here we go, yep. External overlays and external sort of synthetic inputs as well for aimbots. So figure out how it works, get its memory, do stuff with it. Which sounds quite straightforward until you get anti-cheat systems. So they're, what, 20 years now? Probably more, I'd say. And they've sort of, in the last 20 years, shifted from competitive space to standard space. And they've also shifted from user space to kernel space. There's an awful lot of investment going into anti-cheat solutions, especially from companies like Riot, who put that sort of first and foremost in their mission objective. Let's say from Valve, there's an awful lot of very smart people trying to stop people cheating at video games, and a lot of money going into it. So Riot Games, who make Valorant, their Vanguard anti-cheat system has a $100,000 max bug bounty, which is quite a lot for a video game. They put a lot of very clever people in charge. This is a picture of their anti-cheat team, and you can find this picture if you dump the kernel module's memory. It's there along with a with the thoroughly encrypted memory, with a sort of thing asking if you want to go work for them. Right, how do anti-cheats work? This again, sort of higher level approach, because there's an awful lot of it. Player identification via hardware serials, and in some degrees just accounts, right? There you go, I've made it easier. File integrity checks, runtime memory checks, code injection countermeasures, obfuscation, anti-debugging, blocking thread creation, anti-virtualization, processing and scanning, crypt detection, handle stripping, kernel integrity checks, the list goes on. There's an awful lot of stuff going on. We're going to look at anti-debugging in just a minute as an example. It's a fun one, and it's one we test. But I think if I put a full list together, it'd probably be about 100 items. Titles. So for our study, we looked at first-person, third-person shooters, including a few battle royales. The ones in red are the ones we thought about and then didn't, for a few different reasons. Mostly because they're either terribly unpopular, in the case of Halo Infinite. Escape from Tarkov has a slightly different system, because if you die, you lose all your stuff. And PUBG, let's see, skewed by mobile. Destiny 2 is PvE mostly, and Titanfall 2 is also a bit popular these days. Right, so how do we test technical sturdiness? Isolate anti-cheat behaviors, develop scripts to mimic individual cheat behavior. So if we just went online and downloaded some cheats and ran them and got banned, we wouldn't really know what we'd got banned for. So what we do instead is we look at individual anti-cheat techniques / cheat techniques, and we develop individual tests for each one. So anti-debugging, for example, or code injection, or kernel module injection. Using the responses from these, we then constructed our ranking system. So yeah, basically we took all the results and put them into a tier list. Right, an example, anti-debug. As you all should hopefully be familiar, debugging is very useful. It's a very powerful tool for reverse engineering. It's not very useful for debugging, but it's very useful for reverse engineering. They're a core part of dynamic analysis, and they're really good for malware analysis as well. Unfortunately, the anti-cheats don't want us debugging their game, and therefore they employ these anti-debug countermeasures. And a few of these are, well, I'll get again high level, API-based methods. So sometimes maybe just calling the Windows API function is debugger present. It works sometimes. Exception-based. So this could be something like setting the track flag, which is always caught by a debugger because it's used for single-step execution. If you set that and it isn't thrown in the way you'd expect, that might reveal the presence of a debugger. We've got breakpoint detection. So if you set a hardware breakpoint, that shows up in the registers. If you set a software breakpoint, it's in the memory. You can scan for those. Debugging thread detection. Yep. So debuggers have a property in their threads called, I can't remember what it's called, basically saying that they're a debugger, so they don't accidentally debug themselves, which would be hilarious. And I'm assuming that must have happened at Microsoft at some point, because otherwise they wouldn't have it. And time-based vectors. So again, if debugger, adds some overhead to your the speed at which your process can run, you can tell by just timing it. Finally, undocumented window structures, which are my favorite things. For example, the low fragmentation heap. So if you're running under a debugger, you cannot initialize a low fragmentation heap. Try and do it, doesn't work, debugger's there. We then tested the anti-debug on a load of different anti-cheats to see what they did. And the kernel anti-cheat solutions minus Ricochet, which is Call of Duty's one, were pretty respectable. They all prevented this via what's called a handle downgrade. If you don't know what a handle is in Windows, if you want to do something with a process, I'm going to say my mug is a process. It's a lot easier to do stuff with it if I have a handle, right? A mug's not a great example because I can also pick it up like this. But please think of a hammer. It's quite hard to drive a nail into a wall if you haven't got a handle on your hammer. So they downgrade the handle privileges and basically stop you doing anything. So you'll go to try and interact with the process, and it'll say access denied because they've just bumped your privilege down to the lowest possible level. The user-made anti-cheat solutions plus Ricochet, because they're bad, minus VAC, because they're even worse. Detect the debugger once it's attached, and they'll crash the game. And sometimes they might send you a nice message saying, please stop debugging me. Sometimes they won't. They won't really ban you for this, because you might have just been a curious CS student who wanted to debug the game to see how it worked. And finally, you've got Valve anti-cheat, which was absolutely nothing. Debug away. It's great fun. So we did this for a whole bunch of different properties. Anti-debug being one. Some specifically looking at kernel interactions. Some looking at code injection. Some looking at reverse engineering and obfuscation. And we made this testing matrix. All our different things. A squiggle is a sort of semi-pass. A tick is a sort of pass. At a deeper level, we do also rank them based off their response. So some have much stronger responses than others. That's not shown in this diagram, but it is accounted for. And then we rank them. As you can see, there's three sort of big ranks, 1, 2, and 3. Those separate sort of larger differences in strength. Valorant and Fortnite were the two best, mostly because Valorant runs on boot. It's a cheeky little thing that likes to be on your system all the time. And then right at the bottom, we've got the 2 VAC games and Battlefield 1, which is sort of our control, because Battlefield 1 doesn't have an anti-cheat system. It's all server-side. And it basically looks at your stats, says, you were too good at the game, bye. And then I also made this tier list for fun the other day. Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. That's not based on game, that's based on anti-cheat. So Fortnite, for example, runs Battle Eye and Easy Anti-Cheat, which is a bit of a hack. And so it's much stronger than one that just runs one or the other. In fact, when they started running it, there was a vulnerability that the cheat community used to get one to disable the other and the other to disable one. Why go into the kernel when they'll do it for you? Price and uptime. So now that we have a rank of the anti-cheat strengths, we need something to compare it to. So there's a few other things we look at, but the two big ones are price and uptime. Anti-cheats, as it says there, should stop cheating. Preventing cheats running directly is one way, so that's what we call uptime, so how often the cheats are actually working. And then another is increasing the cost of cheating by making it harder to develop them. We measure both of these, as I'll go into them just now. Yeah, we'll start with cheat status. Cheats go down sort of on and off as they're detected, as anti-cheat systems update their services, and as games are updated. So, I don't know, a new version of Fortnite comes out and all of a sudden the view matrix is in a different part of memory. This can happen. Cheat sites have status pages deliberately for this because it would upset you if you'd spent a lot of money on your nice new cheat and you got banned straight away. So they have these status pages which will tell you your cheat's safe to use, your cheat's down, your cheat's detected, right? It's very polite of them to make these sites because we scrape them. Then we analyze how often different cheats go down, and we use these to compare. Here we have the uptime results. There are two caveats here, those being the Battlefield and Team Fortress 2 ones at the top, because we could only successfully scrape enough data from one cheat. But all the others are fairly accurate, especially these ones here where we've got 10 and above. And they give a really good picture of how successful some anti-cheat systems are at taking down cheats. If you remember, Valorant was our top ranked one. As you can see here quite nicely, 65.9% uptime. meaning they do a really good job. About a third of the time, your cheat for Valorant will be down. Here's it on a graph. I've highlighted the outliers, the ones you can sort of take with a bit of a pinch of salt. And then in the orange boxes, we've got the sort of scores we've given each anti-cheat system. And there's quite a nice, well, reverse negative correlation here. If you want that number, there it is. Minus 0.73, 0.74 if you round up. So yeah, it would suggest that the stronger anti-cheat systems have cheats that go down more often. This is science, so we can't say one causes the other, but there is a very strong correlation here. Cheat price. Again, you just go on the site, so I'll just tell you how much cheat costs. It's quite easy. It's a lot easier than if you're looking at, black market drug sites or something, which none of us would ever be looking at apart from for research. Right. Only ESP and aimbots are considered. We don't look at macros and we don't look at spin bots unless they're just packaged in, or trigger bots, because why would you have a trigger bot when you can have an aimbot? We average them out to give a single price per game for cheat, and then we again compare these to our anti-cheat ranks. And here's a nice graph. The red line is the price of a cheat, or the average monthly price of a cheat. To be more specific, the blue line is the popularity of the game, and the orange boxes are once again the anti-cheat strength. If you look, there's a lovely correlation between the price and the anti-cheat strength, and there's a horrible lack of one between the popularity and the price of a cheat for the game. No one plays Battlefield apparently, but it still costs you $90 a month to cheat. And again, if you like numbers, there's some numbers. Specifically, the anti-cheat price, this is an incredibly strong correlation. Again, correlation isn't causation, but we're really happy with these results. This is good suggestion that a technically sturdy anti-cheat drives up the cost of cheating. Suggest, of course. Conclusions. No anti-cheat is unbreakable. Every single game we've looked at has cheats available for a price. And actually, if you remember the cheat status one, 21 cheats for Valorant. Having the game be strong doesn't stop cheat companies making lots of cheats for it. It just makes it expensive. Great variance between the strength of anti-cheat solutions. VAC is awful. Vanguard is not, unless you're a privacy-centered person, in which case Vanguard is probably the worst thing ever. Strong anti-cheats, reduce cheat uptime, and increase price. I should have changed that to say suggests, because again, we're scientists. Yeah, so future work. I'll be talking about next year. Hypervisor-assisted debugging, via virtualization-based anti-debugging / obfuscation, and then reversing some anti-cheat solutions to see what they do sort of at the lowest level. That's it. Thank you. Pizza. Oh, sorry, questions. Anyone has any? Yes.
Have you looked into third-party providers for CS, for example, Payset, Anti-cheat, or ESEA, and how they compare to VAC? Because
no, but that's good. That's good. That is good future work. Yeah. CS cheats specifically, off the top of my head, looking on, having spent far too long on these sites now, have got some will sell CS and some will sell CS in brackets Faceit. And yeah, the Faceit ones are more expensive, but I haven't got the data on that to tell you exactly how much more expensive.
Or if they use, for example, sort of private anti-cheat for competitive matches, right, from majors.
Yeah.
Anti-cheat would use that.
Remotely hosted major competitions, I'm not sure. I think a lot of them make different competitions have different rules. It's obviously easier if you're in person, right? Because you just stand over their shoulder. No, I haven't looked at it. It's very interesting to look at sort of the esports side of it. Yeah, how more competitive those drive prices up. A lot of sites try and sell stuff for like streamers only, which again goes up even more, and a lot of it relies on direct memory access hardware. And these are the kind of things you'd be spending even more money on, but then strictly in this consumer space. Quite a bit. Anyone else? Fantastic.
Yeah, another round of applause, please. Thank you.
All right, we'll have an extended break now because we're waiting for pizza. It'll be here soon, so feel free to have a drink in the meantime. And yeah.
Batteries looking fine. Good news.
Oh, perfect timing.
Where are you putting it?
That's fine.
Yeah, we did that well.
Yeah, that's fine.
We could move these tables.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not my height, but whatever. Not my height, but whatever.
Well, we're like gloved up and giving it that. You just don't get to be on the giving out.
Yeah, that's fair.
Do that, you see.
It's a good idea. President, you're on top of like everything.
Again, twice now.
It's a sign. You're doing industrial. Or is it summer?
Industrial days.
Yeah, it's summer. Yeah, think about it.
Okay,
Would it be easier if we did just clear that?
yeah,
I'll just take the things off.
bring these and everything. But we could do meet on this side, then and then like venture and the other.
No, we need to break all the blocks.
Yeah.
We've got a party now. Is Darling party secretary?
Yes, yeah.
Meets on that side.
Well, the other one, there should be one more.
Everyone, meats on this side, vegetarian on that side.
In a sec.
Yeah. I'm just setting up.
Yeah.
Yeah. There'll be meat sides, so that's slightly contamination.
Okay.
Yeah.
Peter, meat on this side,
We have another few.
cheese and veggie on that
Here you go.
Sure, yeah.
Peter,
When I got the map,
you want, you're speaking up.
I think I give you priority. I can speak.
We have a barbecue chicken. Then we have this one.
Barbecue chicken, double pepperoni.
This one will be.
That's also.
What? You don't do that to me. It's interesting.
Yeah.
What's interesting about it?
I think it's just rude person.
I think
Even for
I think it's one of the.
Yeah. Stuff. Right.
Okay.
All right. Take off. Let's see.
There you go.
I see.
There you go.
I was saying this was.
Give me a form, I didn't know.
Give us a second, then I'll get you a couple of.
These gloves are really awful.
Yeah, I know. You're a surgeon. Come ask him that.
Lee, do you want to have a nap?
I think it's just like.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good enough.
One of each.
Okay.
I want to give you guys 2 sets. Yeah, go for it. Garlic bread still there. There's no room to have everything on here. That's the one.
I just want to be careful around the left one.
Yeah. Are you sure you don't want pizza? Yeah, sure.
Coffee? Yeah. So for this one. I think that's the first time. Golden party's already run out.
What?
We put the vegan ones. That's okay.
I don't believe that.
You ready to have pizza? Yeah.
Meat ones.
Yeah, just grab a napkin and have much pizza you fancy.
I had a supervision meeting in just for that.
We've got barbecue chicken, all meats, double pepperoni.
I'll leave all the vegetarian, don't worry. This is vegetarian,
It's vegan.
veggie. Can you tell me what? That's nice. Yeah, the same one. Cool. Do you want to grab a napkin?
What would we still have?
Yeah.
Vegan.
Of course, we have
Actually,
vegan. Yeah, it's better to have not have vegan.
Probably need to bring them.
Yeah, I guess. Do you want to go?
Now we're asked to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think she put chicken barbecue. Sorry.
How much pieces of
Not much. You have a full vegan pizza.
I'll have a look at vegan.
We still don't have some meat. I say one. I say some. We have 2.5 servings. 1.5 servings.
Yeah, that's.
Well done, my guess.
I don't think we can do. Oh man. Yes, please.
One slice?
Yeah, mate. Nice and cute. I like the big one.
I'm gonna
Wait, that's what it's further.
No, I was very carefully taking it off. Is what I was.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
You know Matty's one. Is Matty's one? Yeah.
Is there a chance of any more? In a second. Let us see some food.
One.
Oh, you don't want it.
I don't have that.
6.
How was that?
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, brilliant. It's definitely very interesting and a bit funny. Options represent.
Yeah, it's fun.
Brilliant. Get the job done. Oh, how's it going? Has anyone won it?
And then we'll give out the one on team. Oh, yes, sorry.
No wonder the voting was so aggressive this year.
Oh yeah, it was so bad. Wait, was it you who mentioned someone came up asking to change their vote?
Yeah, and they were tapping their phones. It was wild.
You have game.
Yes, I do.
So just try to play Snake, pick the wrong button.
Very much so.
Me too. I was just running back and forward really quick. Now it's like you have an issue as well. What do you do? Do you think why you
Full production value that.
Yes.
So, oh, of course, I thought that was. Can't remember how I voted on that. I'm a woman.
Do you want to pause the live stream while pizza breaks on? We
It's a
could.
bit late now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can.
Oh, you can.
So I think just keep it like on it now. Like want me to sort of stay with it in the background or browser tabs, whatever.
Sure.
I don't
Yeah.
know if you have any.
I don't know. We could put this on the big screen. Is what I'm saying.
We're not affiliated with you.
They don't give us money?
Sometimes.
Only when we don't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I will glove up and thought.
that's the women's left officer.
Hi, it's Matty. Well, it's personal that.
In fact, Matty, then. She's not even there. She's not there. She's not there. Martin, if you're not there, you just stay there.
Oh, so the winner wasn't there.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
Good one.
Yes, Abby. Let's go.
Yeah, I think fun.
Let's go. Oh, yes. My photo fraud worked.
See, she actually cared about it.
Should not say anything.
No, I think they just awkwardly.
Oh, no.
Bring you up there. Stand.
Because one of you jumped from a vegan pizza and will announce come grab what's left.
There's garlic bread as well, I think.
Yeah. They got knives and stuff.
I've got garlic.
Hello everyone, there's a little bit more pizza. Cheese.
Yeah.
Apparently we have some garlic bread, which I didn't know about, and some vegan.
I know this is so tense.
Which one is this for?
I think more of these.
Again, right.
Yeah. Who's won so far? Like,
Women.
Mimi is not as one. Internet women's officer. Abby Payne, who is one of our committee members. Yeah. She won. Yes. And Arman Hussein has just won ethnic minority.
Just vegan now.
One last thought.
That one's empty on
Yeah.
At least one of them closed.
Yeah, it's just. Very difficult.
Oh,
the one with that 20 million people.
Six, 7, 8 people.
if you want to see something like the Guild elections again on Wednesday, we are running an AGM. Just so you know.
You find people saying it now.
Yes, correct. That's the story.
Next one.
You had no idea about this, did you, mate?
At 2 PM in my building.
What? No. If you write your votes on a piece of paper and like sign it with your name, sure, that would be kind of funny.
How are we going?
That's a good point. We can't get it through the website, so no. Just vote on your phone at work.
Simply request the captain to land at the nearest convenience.
Unless that's my Wi-Fi. Just give V your login. Committee does not endorse this.
We can vote for yourself twice.
Who's this?
Said what?
Max.
They look famous, don't they?
I don't know who Max is.
I think they look famous.
Yeah, I'll clear up the pizza. We've got a few minutes till we start. You're fully back on time.
This is finished.
Yes. Well,
No one else is able to do this.
I think it's just that I've seen the others. That's all I can think of.
Oh, is it all the one I really
I think maybe that's all I can think
Are you starting at 15?
of. So it's like
We can do.
Like 20 seconds. Bank about
Yeah.
We are
that.
very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Everybody knows it's up and up. So what's the theme? What's going on? Shut it up. So, yeah, I want to oh God. It's been talking about it, isn't it?
Still on feedback. Are we going with the next?
Yeah, we can start the one.
Shall we move this crap out the way?
Yeah, it might be. Someone's moved.
Yeah, we should be ready. Right. Who's up next? Okay. Shit. Don't worry, I saved us.
It was up there on the screen.
Yes.
Hopefully I was quicker than the frame, right?
I don't think so, mate.
It was set below dust. Is there anything on there that actually no? I was never hit. Should have brought my copy of War Games. Some post-spectral against Dave.
Got the Blu-ray player. Last part time, the last part time one. You know, the other guy was part time. So they really part time.
Why did they?
Why did he get a like minute? There's a switch on. Yeah. Let's see if everyone else, everyone does still. That's fine. Matches them up.
I'm really good at finding you.
That was a big fan. Yeah, thanks some people.
I was off to Guilds and Actions. That's all come up soon.
Okay. Are you plugging in HDMI?
I'm gonna try it. But last time I tried it, my HDMI didn't work. In worst case, I'll email it to you.
Yeah, I might have to have them soon. You've got keys?
I told you.
Oh, yeah, for the demonstration.
Okay.
Are you gonna do that one first?
Yeah, it should be there.
Why is it supposed to be called?
Oh, that's the feature on the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh wow.
It's set to play.
It won't be up there at all.
Great. Hang on.
We don't want just a little.
No, that's not on the right screen.
That the one you do.
Yeah.
Yes, to correct me. I'm so proud of myself.
It's pretty obvious. It's not really like a secret.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
My this cable is very.
Oh no.
Hang on.
So bright.
Yeah.
It makes us look very dramatic.
I might try to. I'm just gonna wait for you are not. Because I feel like I'm just trying to wait.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh. Yeah, that's my dodgy HDMI. Yes.
Like one sentence abstract to say about it.
On the security of accent that too.
Introducing our second PhD speaker of the night, we have Dan Clark talking about the security of Paxton Net 2.
Great. Okay. So Net2 is an access system developed by a company called Paxton. It is used for getting people in and out of buildings. You know, in the same way you use your student card to get into CS, lots of people use these things to get into there. And apparently my HDMI is cramped. Oh, wow.
Yeah, do you need it?
Nope. As long as I don't touch it, it's fine. So, except, oh, I'm an idiot. I'm using that keyboard, even though it's not plugged in. So, you may have seen Paxton Net 2 around. If you've ever used or seen a fob like this, or readers like any of these attached to buildings, it's very popular in the UK. My supervisor's building actually has it, which is why I did this project, because he wanted to clone his building fob, because his building was going to charge him like 50 quid to do it. And I did it for him for 2 quid, but that's a bit of a spoiler. So the genuine use case for these things, this is the software that they use. They use it with this middle reader here, and they buy the fobs for 2 quid each, and then they program them, and then they sell them to poor people who are living in these buildings. When you put it in to the system, you scan the fob, and it comes up with a number. This is a mystical, unique ID for that fob, and that associates with all the permissions for like which doors you can access, when you can access them, things like that. So when we were analyzing this, the first question was, what protocol does it even use? And is it a secure one? So the way, just looking at them, they're very small little things, tiny, as you can see. So I knew from my background in RF, you can't really have higher frequency RFID where if you've got an antenna coil that's this small. So I knew it was low frequency, 125 kilohertz. And if you, using the wrong keyboard again, if you take one of these devices, this is the Proxmark 3. This big one here is the original. And then this one here on the right is the much nicer, newer one, which I didn't get to use in my project because it was released like a month after my project finished. But it's much smaller and much nicer. So I set up a sniff with my brilliant diagram. The Proxmark connected to an antenna. I had to wind my own antenna because you can't really buy antennas that are the right size and matching for this size of fob. I just stick it broadly near the tag and the reader when you connect it. This revealed, just broadly, just going through the Proxmark settings and asking it to detect what kind of fob it is, that it's HiTag 2, which is wonderful. HiTag 2 as a protocol has 2 modes, password mode and crypto mode. Password mode is really dumb. It sends the password just unencrypted, and password's correct, then it lets you authenticate with the tag. Crypto mode is also really stupid. It uses a completely insecure bit of crypto that doesn't work at all. So all you have to do is recover this third line, nonce and encryption of nonce, and then you can just calculate the secret key. It's really dumb. It's called a linear feedback shift register, FSR. And one of the lecturers actually at Birmingham, Fabio Garcia, who you've probably not seen because over COVID, he temporarily moved to Spain and has never come back, despite still being employed. He's still a professor. Technically my second supervisor, even though I haven't seen him for years. So he broke that crypto on HiTag 2 many, many years ago, because HiTag 2's main use is actually for immobilizers in cars. HiTag 2 is set up in your car key, and if the car doesn't detect that the HiTag 2 fob in your key is there, it doesn't let the engine start. But yeah, he broke that and then stole people's cars. His own car. Yeah, the GCHQ actually bought us a car to test it, which is now sat rotting and rusting in a car park at the UAB. So the trace itself. Oh yeah, so here's a good question. Who here thinks it's using the stupidly insecure password mode or the still really insecure crypto mode? Put your hands up if you think it uses password mode. Yeah, in crypto mode? Yeah, you people are wrong. It's password mode. So this is what the trace looks like in password mode. And when we recorded it, we got this trace out. The start auth is this first message, the OXC0. It's also the last message, just because that's the start of the next sequence. And as you can see from this diagram, there are a lot more. So really, actually, this trace is only a recording of what the reader is sending because the coil wasn't that well matched. So we didn't actually pick up anything from the tag, but that's fine. Because if you look at the messages that the reader sends the start auth, and then it sends the password, and then it sends a read request. So we can see here, the first message is the start auth. The second message is the password. So it's BDF5 E846. And because that's what the reader's sending, because there's technically a password in the other direction as well, it's actually the same for all of them. Every building, every reader, they have that same password. So it's, yeah, BDF5 E846. I will never forget it because I typed it in so many millions of times. And then the next few messages are just read requests, which would have responses if we could receive the tag data. So what's next? This is a handy baby, excellently drawn by my assistant. Tom actually bought one, my supervisor, he bought one for me to do this project, and then I lost it when I moved house. So it's like 400 quid. And again, they're mainly used for cloning car keys. So if you go to a key cutter or whatever who you want them to copy your car key, they will use one of these. So I use this because the Proxmark is actually a bit limited in its high-tide functionality because they updated it and broke it and I couldn't figure out how to get it back. So I use the handy baby. You just put the tag in, you type in the password, which we recovered from the trace, and then you hit read and it reads it all out. So this is the data of a tag. And you can see it's got 8 pages. Starts with the UID. That is completely unique and not changeable. And then the password, as you can see, BDF5E846. So what the handy baby does is it just pretends to be a reader and reads everything out. And as part of that, it also reads the tag password, which HiTag, when they made the standard, said, make sure this is different for every single tag. And then Paxton read that and thought, nah, fuck it, we're going to have it the same on every single tag. So it's only 24 bits, and then there's a configuration byte which sets like which things are read out. And then some data. And the green bit is the actually important bit of the data for Paxton. And that is what I decoded here. I don't expect you to look at this. It's just basically, this is the result of my reverse engineering of what those green bytes mean. This is zoomed in on one of them, and the tag with its magic number from before. And we can see that if you take the top row, which lines up with this one, first digit, which is actually the last digit because, I don't know, they're horrible people. It's literally just 5 bits. Well, the first one is the parity for the remaining 4 bits. And then those 4 bits correspond to the last number. So it's not like they're encoding whatever that is, 9,160,000. And then it's 91 million, but whatever. It's just that they encode each digit individually. So the previous, the previous digit encoded will have just been the number 3. So super easy to decode. So that means that I can now create a tag with any ID I like. I can buy a new tag and I can write whatever ID I like to it. So as long as I know what ID should have, like if I somehow knew the ID of a cleaner or someone in the building who has a lot of building access, I could just create that tag. Then it comes to the actually useful bit, which is cloning, which is basically you just grab your handy baby and you say, read from this tag, and you put the other tag in, and you say, write all of that data to this tag. And then you have a perfect clone. It doesn't copy the UID, but they don't check that. So great. So that basically works. Then it comes to emulating. So the Proxmark, especially the new one, is actually quite good at emulating lots of tags, including high tag. And considering the tag password is always the same, it means that you can go up to any building and just cycle through all of the possible numbers, which there aren't that many of, until a door opens. You can just hold it up against the reader. Now, I never actually got this working because the code for the Proxmark is actually crap, but that's definitely future work that I would like to do. So, top takeaways from this talk. Don't transmit your keys in plain text. Pretty obvious, hopefully. Don't reuse your keys. Security through obscurity is bollocks, so don't do that. And if you use packs and fobs, just don't leave them lying around places. The range on all of these readers is like 5 centimeters. So as long as you don't have people like sketchily waving devices around your keys, you're probably fine. But also, it wouldn't require that much to get this emulation working, and then they can basically get into any building they like, which is great. Thank you for listening. Special thank you to my lovely assistant Leaf for all the art. About an hour ago, this was crap white background, black text slides, and now it looks like this. Ignore the message in the corner. But any questions at all? Fantastic. Great. Oh, does anyone actually have one of these fobs? Anyone use them? Anyone ever seen one? Yeah. Okay. Great. Great.
Have you looked at other types of fobs and readers, and do they have similar ones?
Yeah. So actually, the first thing I tried, which is that way far, was actually taking this lovely number and programming just that number onto a completely insecure card called an EM401 card, which has no security whatsoever. And then I just held up against the reader and the door opened. I later found out not every building has that feature enabled, where you can just write it to any old random RFID tag and it'll just open. But Tom's building did, so that was quite entertaining. So those are both low frequency NFC, RFID tags. There are high frequency ones, so there's MiFi Classic and MiFi DesFire. DesFire is what your student cards use. That's actually considered secure. It uses triple DES, and it's quite clever. Well, triple DES is pretty good, but MiFi Classic is crap. It has appalling security, and if anything still uses MiFi Classic, like my undergraduate student card did, you can just crack the keys and read things out, and then you can clone them and do whatever you want. And those actually have got unique IDs that most systems do actually check. But because they were so popular, manufacturers in China started manufacturing special ones that you could change the UID from. So I just bought one of those, and then you could emulate the whole thing, clone the whole thing. So it's pretty good. There are a few other types, but very, very few are secure. DesFire is probably the securest, most secure. Yeah, the DesFire EV3, that is, which is the one the student cards use. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Great, thank you. I actually have 2 presentations because I'm doing something else as well. This was my master's project, so this is dated back 2016. Yeah, and the other one is closer to my current research. Yeah. This one is going to be less pretty because I finished it during Sam's talk, so Liv didn't have a chance to make it look nice. If I can find it.
I genuinely love it. I think it's better than any art I could ever make. It's like,
Where is the
I know,
term?
it's so bad that I feel like it's abstract art, you know what I mean?
So bad.
It's so bad, it's good. This is so Dan. It's actually more Dan
Thank
than
you.
anything.
Great, there you go. See, this is now what you're going to get. Okay. So When I started my PhD, my main focus was on Bluetooth. That's now changed because of reasons. But in the process of that and the work I did for 2 years before that, I learned quite a lot about Bluetooth and its security problems. So, quick intro to Bluetooth. It was invented in 1994 by Ericsson, who later became Sony Ericsson, which you may have heard of, but they still don't do much these days. The Bluetooth spec itself is at last count 3,085 pages, which is crap. Uses 2.4 gigahertz. It comes with 2 operating modes. There's Bluetooth low energy, and then there's Bluetooth extended data rate, basic rate extended data rate, which used to be called Bluetooth Classic. BLE is super low power. It's what you use to connect to your smartwatch, those kind of things. BR-EDR is much higher power, but much better throughput. So it's what you use for your headphones, for example. They started off with legacy pairing, which is crap. And then they introduced secure connections, which is mostly crap. But it's okay. So you've got these legacy pairing modes. I'm going to briefly explain each of them. Legacy pairing has a long-term key, LTK, which is generated from a TK, the temporary key, and some random nonces that are exchanged in the pairing process. There are 3 modes for legacy pairing: just works mode, passkey entry mode, and out of band mode. Just works mode sets that temporary key to be 0, which genius. Passkey entry mode is the one way it shows you a number and you have to type it into the other screen. And that can be a number between 0 and 999,999, which is also dumb. And then there's outbound mode, which is actually very sensible. You may or may not have seen this because it's actually quite rare. It's basically where you tap your phone on like RFID or some other non-Bluetooth method of communication for exchanging TK. So that uses 128 bits, which is fine for now. Then it comes to secure connection mode, which is much newer, 2014, I believe. This is where, again, there are some random nonces and a public key, which you share, which each device shares with the other. And then you calculate a confirmed value using those public keys on the random nonces to prove that you are who you say you are. And then it generates a long-term key using elliptical curve Diffie-Hellman, which is basically the same as Diffie-Hellman for the purposes of most of this. This one comes in 4 modes, just works, where it doesn't verify the public key at all, which is dumb. But I should mention, the reason why just works exists is for devices that don't have a screen and don't have a keyboard. Because then you can't really do anything other than having the key 0. Passkey entry, this goes bit by bit through the passkey, each time exchanging a nonce and then mapping it with that nonce using the secret key. Numeric comparison just max the whole thing. Numeric comparison is the one where it shows a number on both screens and you say yes or no as to whether or not the number is correct. Then there's out of band mode, which just securely sends the public keys via whatever out of band method you want, normally RFID, ironically. So I'm going to quickly mention between protocol tax and implementation tax. I'm not going to talk at all about implementation tax because I find protocol tax are much more interesting to me. They're things like bad crypto, flaws in the protocol that mean you can extract the key, things like that. Actual issues with the specification that are hard to change. Implementation attacks are like buffer overflows in someone's crap implementation of the protocol on your smart device or your phone or whatever. Again, I don't really care about those because I think they're less impact. If you find an issue with one particular smartwatch, it affects all those users. But if you find an issue with the Bluetooth protocol, it affects everybody. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of attacks, basically, and they come in 2 categories. One is manual analysis, and I came up with a little bit of Python code that explains broadly how manual analysis works. You look at all the pages, all 385 pages, and then you read them, you think about them, and think, is there a vulnerability here? If so, you store it, and then you think even harder about if there's a vulnerability there, and then you store it. Great. I'm a bit biased, you'll see later. So the first paper on this topic was called "With Low Energy Comes Low Security." this in 2013, specifically against BLE and passkey entry mode in legacy pairing mode, because no one had really adopted secure connections by that point. Actually, I don't think it existed. It's really clever. You just record the pairing, and then remember those 999,999 keys? It just tries them all, which takes less than a second. Fantastic. But that's mainly because the things that are exchanged, they aren't difficult to calculate. So that's why it's so quick. If those things that were exchanged took ages, if it was just something that was very slow, then this would be more harder to do. But no thought into it. So less than a second. And that was back in 2013. It took less than a second. So great. 2016, so a little bit of time passed. Then you had a similarly stupid thing where they just recorded a confirm message from the pairing and the random nonce that we used to generate it. And then they just undid it. So kind of when the algorithm multiplied, you just divide and brilliant. And then you just recover the TK. So it doesn't matter what it is. You can just recover it, even in out of band mode, really. Then you've got this nice tool called Gattaca, and their paper called Gattacking. GAT is like a layer of Bluetooth. And that basically, you perform either of the previous attacks to recover some long-term keys, and then you connect to two devices. You sit in the middle and man in the middle it, and you forward everything between the two. It's not very difficult. It's just a nice tool that does it all for you. And then you can just read out any data. So the important thing about that is both devices think they're talking to a genuine other device, and it's completely undetected. Then my favoritely named attack, the knob is broken. NOB stands for Key Negotiation of Bluetooth, 2019, focused on legacy and secure connections in BREDR mode. So that's the high data rate, high power mode. It's literally that during pairing, one of the messages that happens before you actually enable any sort of encryption authentication is, what maximum key size do you support? So the attacker just sets that to the lowest value, which is 7 bytes, which is like 48 bits, which you then just, no, 56 bits, and which you just then crack because 56 bits is not hard. Genius. Then we get on to the fixed coordinate invalid curve attack, or breaking the Bluetooth pairing, as they call their paper. This is about secure connections. So this is the first paper that really goes into secure connections. It applies to just works, passkey entry, and numeric Harrison node. And it just doesn't check the validity of the public keys. So this is specifically a elliptical curve Diffie-Hellman public key issue. Basically, they just, public key has to be a place on the curve. And Bluetooth doesn't tell you to check that. So as an attacker, you can put it in a specifically crafted area that isn't on the elliptical curve, which completely buggers the crypto. And you can literally just extract the long-term key from the Diffie-Hellman exchange, which is bad. Yeah, genius. And that applies to BREDR mode. And actually, later on, they also did it for BLE. Then you get, the knob is broken. Again, this time they applied it to BLE. It's exactly the same problem, except worse, because it doesn't have the minimum 7 bytes. So you can just set it to 1 bit. Genius. Absolutely genius. They haven't fixed this, you know. Some of these they've fixed. And by fixed, I mean, because Bluetooth insists on having backward compatibility, all fixed means is they release a new version of the protocol that says, all this old stuff still works, just please don't use that old bit. And people still do, so fantastic. Then we get bias, the Bluetooth impersonation attacks. This is a little more complicated. So this is after pairing. All of these other ones require you as an attacker to be there when pairing is happening, either to sniff or to man in the middle. This one doesn't. This requires you to just be there whilst the two devices are connecting, after they've happily been paired. The initiator will start off by sending some sort of confirm value to prove that it holds the LTK, the long-term key. So the attacker, who's pretending to be the responder, just says, yes, that value is correct, honest, even though it doesn't actually know the long-term key, because Bluetooth is really dumb and doesn't actually authenticate the responder to the initiator, only the other way around. So then the attacker can just send anything they like to the initiator, and the initiator normally just accepts it. Happy days. Then this is another one of my favorites, method confusion. So I told you about these two modes, numeric comparison, where it shows you the numbers on both screens and you say if it's correct. And then there's passkey entry, where you type in the code from one into the other. So they asked the question, what happens if you trick one device into using numeric comparison and the other into passkey entry, and you convince the user to type the numeric comparisons number into the passkey entry field? What that really means is, when that happens, it completely buggers the crypto, because both are made with certain assumptions about what the attacker does and doesn't know, and by tricking it into using the wrong passkey, that completely goes out of the window, and the attacker learns way too much information about both things and can crack the passkey and then recover the LTK. Genius. Then, great. Bluetooth. So basically, you can see Bluetooth is a bit shit but by this point, but keeps going. Bluetooth, fantastic. So this is a clever thing where they thought this is actually really useful for headphones. Let's say you've got a device like headphones that support both Bluetooth extended data rate and BLE, because maybe when it's not playing anything, you want to communicate on the low power mode, and then when you're playing something, you want to use the high power mode because you want good audio quality. And they don't want you to have to pair with both. So it allows you to pair with one, so either the basic rate or the BREDR or the BLE, and then it shares the long-term key between the two modes, which is really dumb because, again, they've both been made with completely different security assumptions about what the attacker does and doesn't know. What that means is that this is actually really simple. You as an attacker, so Alice and Bob have already paired. The attacker pairs with Bob with in this case, BREDR, pretending to be Alice with Alice's MAC address, because it's easy to change and pretend to be a MAC address. It's not authenticated at all. And that pairing, by doing that, it overwrites the LTK that you previously had stored for Alice with the new one that you've just paired with them pretending to be Alice, which means you now know the LTK that it thinks is associated with the real Alice, which means you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever Alice could do. Then we get to something that's much closer to my actual research. This is the other approach to finding vulnerabilities, only 5 lines. So you have a model, you again iterate through all 3,085 pages, but this time, all you have to do is read it and then model it, add it into a formal model. And then you ask the prover, and logical prover, to prove that model and ask it, find all the vulnerabilities in this model, please. And then it does that. And it does it in a formally verifiable way. So as long as your model is correct, it will correctly find all the vulnerabilities that exist in the protocol. Obviously, making sure the model is correct is the actually hard bit, and that's what my research is in. Originally in Bluetooth, now in industrial control systems. One common prover is called ProVerif, which is what Blesser uses. This is for spoofing attacks against reconnections in BLE. Again, connection reestablishment, so they have already paired, and you didn't see that as an attacker. First, the attacker connects to Bob, pairs with it, gathers some information, and then the attacker connects to Alice and pretends to be Bob. It just says, "Hi, I'm Bob." Alice then tries to read some data from the attacker, thinking it's Bob, before enabling encryption, because that's how BLE enables encryption. You try and read something that requires encryption, and when the other side says no, that's what starts pairing. It's the only way you can start pairing. So what this attack does is just Bob, while the attacker just doesn't say no. It allows the read and provides some of the information that Bob gave you earlier to convince Alice that you really are Bob, because you know some things that Bob knows. And then Alice just accepts the data, and you can just go along with whatever you want to do. You get these paper titles just get worse. extrapolating formal analysis to uncover attacks in Bluetooth party entry pairing. This uses the prover that I use, Tamarin, which is great, far better than Proverif. No real reason, it's just what I use. So this is for devices that support multiple connections, e.g. you are connected to multiple devices at the same time, and therefore you might allow pairing at the same time. And the trick here is basically the random number generator that generates the passkey is, they don't really specify how to do that in the spec. So one common issue is that if you try and pair at the same time as another device that's trying to pair, you'll both be given the same passkey. Yeah, which is really dumb. So you just finish you replay every message that Bob sends, and the attacker then finish pairing with Alice, even though doesn't know the passkey. Then another terrible title. I'm nearly done, I swear. Tamarin-based analysis of Bluetooth uncovers 2 practical pairing confusion attacks. This is confusion between secure connections mode and legacy pairing mode. So again, you man in the middle it, you convince 2 different sides, one to use secure connections, one to use legacy pairing. You then exploit one of the earlier vulnerabilities we've done to break the legacy pairing, because that's trivial, because things like temporary TKs, temporary keys that only go up to 999,999, because that's easy. And then because the passkey is the same between the 2 secure connections and legacy pairing connections, you also have that secure one now. And the genuine devices have no idea that you've actually just used the dodgy encryption rather than the secure one. Brilliant, done, fantastic. Top takeaways: don't trust Bluetooth for secrecy, authenticity, or privacy, basically nothing. If you ever end up building a protocol, please use standard techniques rather than making up your own crap like Bluetooth did. When you build the protocol document itself, please define the security bit in a nice, easy to read section so we don't have to read 3,000 pages. Please formally model your own protocol. And as a great example, Apple have just done this with a new version of iMessage, PMQ, post-quantum 3, PQ3. So they did it properly, they formally modeled it, they published papers on it, they approached the people that wrote Tamarin to say, hi, can you please model our protocol? Proved it secure, and then happy days. I don't think it's actually running yet, but it's published. Thanks for listening, and do not buy Bluetooth-enabled pacemakers. They genuinely exist. Do not. Anything that is actually important, do not do. If you're, in MI5, don't use Bluetooth headphones, things like that, because it's all crap. Any questions? Thank you very much. Three.
At least you didn't need to use my iPad. I thought you were gonna have to.
How would I use it?
I thought you were gonna be deleted. I wasn't
Very much.
How can it reach earlier on and it doesn't reach now?
Definitely reached before.
Decided to use that boot screen this time.
Randomly picks one way to.
It seems to depend on what it thinks the monitor's capable of.
Sometimes it comes up in text mode, sometimes it comes up in graphic mode. I haven't worked out the rhyme or reason for it.
These computers and monitors. Could you like?
Yes. Audience watching their phones. Terrible. Right, here we go.
Could be all right.
I can speak loudly.
Hello, everyone. While Peter sets up, if you haven't noticed already, all tickets are now live. Bum, bum, bum. Go to cssbham.com/ball to see all the information about the most important event coming up this year. The ball is much more important than the AGM.
Okay, so that's one thing we need started.
There might not be a sign.
Not my problem. I won't be here to run it. I'll be far, far away.
Okay, yeah, ready to go. There we go. Yeah, excellent.
And introducing our final speaker of the night, all the way from the National Museum of Computing, we have Peter Onion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary. I don't know. Right, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Good. So, PNMOC at Bletchley Park. So what we're going to do, hopefully, I ran through this morning and it took 55 minutes. So we'll take a quick look around the museum. Those of you that have visited the museum know that it takes about 2 hours to go round. So we're going to do it in 20 minutes. So don't hang about. Then we're going to have a look at, spend the second half talking about the machine that I look after, the Elliott 803. We'll have a quick brief look at the hardware and then we'll try and do a bit of programming on it. So I brought an 803 with me. Right, so the museum. Quick tour around the museum. No, wrong slide, wrong thing. What's happened there? Stupid computers decided to move that. There, come on. Why am I clicking on one and it's showing me the other? Trouble is, I run twin-headed at home, so. I think that's probably what I'm going to have to do. It comes out of twin-headed out of display. There we go. Right. Okay. So sorry about that. So this is where we start the wartime story in the museum. Anybody know what that is? That's the Enigma machine. Yeah. So that's the thing that the German army used, sort of infantry. They'd have one of those. You type your message on the keyboard, you press Q, and anything other than Q lights up. Yeah. So you can't encrypt X to X. That's a weakness. That's not an original, that's a reproduction. That is the machine that helps with breaking the encryption. That's the Turing-Welshman bomb. Again, that's not original, that's a recreation that was built a good few years ago now. That's essentially 36 Enigma machines running in parallel checking, looking for a particular weakness. So that before you use this, there is some manual pre-processing goes on. It's things to do with cribs and things called menus, which is the way you set it up. It then checks about 18,000 combinations in 10 minutes. And when it stops, it might be a solution. It might be the right key. You then take the settings, put them into another machine, type some text in, and if it comes out in German, then you know you're winning. Yeah. So that's the front of the machine. That's the back. You can see it's a electromechanical machine. We've got a big motor down here. Can't point at that, can I? Never mind. Big motor at the bottom. That's the back of all the drums, the wheels, and then this is the electro bit. Lots of relays and stuff in there and counters. Interesting thing about this has now been running longer than any bomb ran during the war. Yeah, so they are now finding wear and tear issues that never came up during the war, because this machine is older than any of the ones that ran during the war. This is what we call the Tunney Gallery. This is a recreation of a Y station. I keep wanting to lean on this, and I suspect if I do, it'll fall over. A Y station, which was the intercept. So obviously they're sending their messages initially in Morse code, hand-sent Morse. So the message you got out of an Enigma was sent by hand Morse, was then received with receivers like these, scattered all around the country. Turns out there was one of these stations within about 3 miles of where I was born, and nobody knew about it. So it's hand sent, so it was easy to copy down. When they moved on to the Lorenz encryption, which we'll look at in a minute, that's teleprinter traffic. It's about sort of 50, 60 bits a second, faster than you can copy by hand. So these machines down here, you see these cylinders along the bottom? They're called undulators, and they actually draw a graph of the digital signal that's being received. And they then had trained women that looked at these, found the start and stop bits in every character, and transcribed them onto paper tape. So similar equipment used for Enigma and then later for Lorenz. That's the Lorenz machine. As you can see, just looking at it, it's much more complicated than the Enigma. That only had 3 wheels that stepped round. This has got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 or so wheels. And they don't all step in turn. There's little things that you can move on them that determine when each wheel knocks the next one along. And that's all part of the setup. So you feed a teleprinter message into that. What comes out the other end is garbage. You transmit the garbage, the encrypted text. I'm not a cryptographer, you can tell. Yeah. And then at the other end, you have the identical machine set up identically. You put the encrypted message in and you get plain text out. Lorenz machine. That is a Tunney machine, and that's the British implementation of the Lorenz machine. Whereas the Lorenz machine was mechanical, this uses the top 3 rows up there. You can see them. They're called uniselectors. They're electrical stepping switches. They're used in telephone exchanges. But that's an analog, and where you have the starting positions of the wheels and the positions of these little tags that I mentioned that control, that's the where you put the white pegs in the black holes. And as you can see, there are quite a lot of possible combinations. Yeah. But what that did was, once the next machine that we talk about has given you the key, you feed the enciphered message into that, and it prints up in plain German on the teleprinter, hopefully. Yeah, Tunney machine. That's a thing called the Heath Robinson, which was the first attempt at mechanizing the breaking of the Lorenz key. What you can't see, because I didn't take a very good picture of it, there's actually 2 loops of paper tape there with the message on. And the loops are 1 character different in length. So as it spins around, the messages slide by each other. And the electronics does some statistical analysis on a character by character basis, looking for patterns. Now, the problem with that was keeping the tapes in step. It didn't scale, basically, but the principle was correct. So what happened then? We go into the Colossus Gallery. That's the famous Colossus machine that Tommy Flowers did the implementation of. And that only has a single length of paper tape, so there's no synchronization problems. The sliding by is done electronically within the machine. Now, It's not a general purpose computer, but it was programmable. You can see there's various knobs and switches and sets of pegs and things at the end there. So it was programmable. It wasn't a stored program like we would consider it today, but it was programmable and it was electronic and it did do computation. Yeah. That's the back of it. Those valves there are called pyrotrons, and each row of them represents one wheel. And that's a Colossus engineer, Peter, looking at it yesterday morning. Yeah. So we now move post-war into the first generation gallery. This is the machine, called the Witch, or originally called the Harwell Decatron computer, which was built at Harwell in 1952, I think. It's a decimal calculator. It was built to replace people with hand-cranked calculators. Remember when people were called computers? Anybody seen Missing Figures? Yeah, I watched it for the first time last week. It's brilliant. Yeah, so this was the Harwell's machine that replaced their computers. Yeah, decimal. The tubes at the end there are called decatrons. They have 10 stable. I told you I'd knock it over. They have 10 stable states. It's like remember the mechanical mile counters in cars? Counts up to 9 and then knocks the next one on. Yeah, it's exactly the same technique. What's happened there? Something's timed out. I have an email login screen.
That actually might.
There we go. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And you turn on in a bit.
These things that you're not supposed to turn on and off, aren't they?
I don't know how.
Anyway, so the Witch, is it coming back?
Yeah.
Okay. Was designed to be no faster than the person with a mechanical calculator, but more reliable. Didn't need to go home at night, didn't need to have lunch, didn't make mistakes. But was no quicker than a human. In fact, they raced humans against the machine. When Harwell had finished with it, it went to Wolverhampton Institute because they won it in a competition. It was put up as a prize, and that's when it became called the Witch, the Wolverhampton Instrument for Teaching Computing from Harwell. Yeah, the Witch. Here we go. It's coming back. Here it comes. There it comes. There we go. You'll be able to see it in a minute. That's just a bit of a closer up look. Is it coming back?
Yeah.
Still a bit dim, isn't it? That's just a close up look of the two rows of, they're the two accumulators where the actual maths is done. The bluey-green cylinders on the side have got lots of post office relays in. So the actual control logic is all relays, but the actual calculating and the storage is all electronic. So it's a bit of a hybrid. It was a complete dead end technologically. There was never a Witch 2 or a Decatron 2. Other end of the gallery, you've got this, which is EDSAC, which is electronic storage and something. Built at Cambridge in the early 50s. That's a recreation. It's taking them as long to commission it as they did to commission the original one, because all they had to start with was the original designs, not the final designs that worked. Yeah, so they're having to go through all the evolution to make the thing work. It's a fairly small team of people working on it. They've been working on it for about 10 years, whereas Cambridge had a much bigger team and they managed it in about 3 years. So, you know, having to relearn all the same techniques and technologies, all valves. And the problem is, of course, after working on it for 10 years, some of those valves have worn out. That's the engineer's monitoring panel where you can look at the various waveforms and signals within the machine. And there's an engineer working on it on Thursday morning. And this higgledy-piggledy non-structured wiring, that's how the original was. That's not out of place. Okay, we now move through into the large systems gallery into the 1960s. This is the machine that I look after, the Elliott 803. In those 4 cabinets there, we've got power cabinet, 2 middle of the CPU and half the store, and the end one is the other half of the store. As you can see, it now looks much nicer. In fact, the managing director of Elliott was at an exhibition where there was an Olivetti machine on the next stand. Italian design, all beautiful, probably curvy and whatever. And he went, but when he came back to England, he said, right, the next machine that we market is going to look nice. And they actually employed a proper industrial designer to actually design the cabinets. So they were first produced in 1958 until about 1965. The operator's console, the paper tape reader. That's a bit odd. It's a thing called a magnetic film handler. Everybody else will call it a tape drive. But you can see it's 35mm sprocketed film stock, but with a full magnetic coating. The movie industry used that for recording sound. Elliott's were at Boreham Wood, which is pretty much Elstree, film industry. Yeah. So the mechanics of that are straight out the film industry. It's a film editing suite. If you take the magnetic heads out, put a bulb, a lens, and a little screen, that's where the cutting room cuts got made. You view the rushes and cut it forwards and backwards. So that's block addressable, and each reel of 1,000 foot holds about 1.2 megabytes. This is then the next machine that Elliott built. This is the 903. I've stood on it again. Out of the way. We've now moved into a proper second generation machine. It's an 18-bit machine. You look carefully, there's 18 switches along the top. If you look very carefully in the left-hand cabinet in the middle row, there are 18 boards that are the same. And they're 1 bit of each of the registers. So you can see the 18 bits and the carry goes between each board and the backplane. Originally designed as a mobile computer. They put these in tanks and aircraft and things. This is it in commercial garb. So you've got the processor and 8K of memory on the left, and then on the right, there's another 8K of memory. The VT220 is a bit out of place, the terminal, the orange terminal, but if you ran the teleprinter all the time, it'll wear out in a week. In fact, is Mr. Clark still here? That's the teleprinter that your father restored. A bit of a close-up there of the processor. This is an IBM 1130. It gains its place in our museum because they were built in Scotland, in Greenwich. 16-bit mini computer aimed at scientific computing and education. So lots of universities had these, either as standalone machines or as front ends to much bigger mainframes. They were remote job entry stations. That's our big mainframe, the ICL 2966, big commercial computing machine. You know, did payroll, databases, order handling, stock control, all that sort of stuff. The 5 grade cabinets, we actually only use 3 of them because the 2 end ones are all for communicating with disk drives that we don't run. And we've got these 3 terminals at the front here that you can play Adventure and some other things on when the machine's running. So if you were an operator on one of these machines, you would have been standing in front of this, waiting for it to tell you to put another tape on the tape drive at the back, or change a disk out of an exchangeable disk drive, or put a new box of paper in the printer and stuff like that. So they're the operator's consoles. And there is one of our volunteers. That's a cut open disk drive so that you can actually see inside it. The disk does spin, but not at a representative speed, and it goes around slowly. That's the Marconi TAC, of which there were 5 built. 3 of them went to it was either Norway or Sweden to do radar processing, looking for probably Russians coming over the horizon. So they built 5. They used 3 of them for that contract. The remaining 2, a couple of years later, went into the Wilva nuclear power station on Anglesey. and they ran there for something like 40 years, monitoring faults and alarms. This is the machine that if they'd have had one of these at 3 Mile Island, they wouldn't have had a nuclear accident, because this would have told them what to do first. Yeah, the pair of them ran in parallel, checking each other. Again, lots of blinking lights on the console. That works. It runs. That's the thing that runs all the clocks in the museum, proper pendulum clocks and current loops to drive all the clocks. So we have a thing called museum time, which is plus or minus a couple of minutes, depending on whenever John came in and reset it again. That's half of what we call the PC gallery. It's basically the 1980s home computer gallery, when there were lots and lots of different computers. So I think the one in the middle might be an Amiga of some sort. I'm not particularly sure. Then in the other half, we've definitely got a BBC there, an Atari 800, I think, there's an Apple, and that looks like a Spectrum, all running typical games of the time. And you've got some other machines there. CBM Pets, they were just coming into school when I left school and went to university. What else have you got there? There's an Apple, there's an Next Cube there, an Amiga, and an original IBM PC at the end. Recently restored. This is the Fibre to Flowers gallery, which has been exhibition put on by the Communications Heritage Trust. And that's actually a telephone exchange. You can pick up one of the phones and dial the other one, proper dial. The Strowger exchange goes click, 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 and then the other one rings, and you can actually talk. It's actually a working telephone exchange. So this covers the development from Tommy Flowers, after he'd done Colossus, actually went into digital telephony, digital telephone exchanges. And digital telephone exchanges were around a lot earlier than you might think. But of course, these days, it's all boring, rack full of goodness knows what, digital processors of some sort. Nowhere near as interesting as a Strowger exchange. And that actually shows you all the bits of equipment that are involved in actually getting ADSL to your home. Now, various devices. That's our Cray 1, unfortunately not working. So that was designed by Seymour Cray after he left Control Data Corporation. The typical supercomputer. That's the sort of thing that the Met Office used to use for weather forecasting and all that sort of stuff. The big number crunching, the early big number crunching, were done on supercomputers like that. Have you ever used one of those? No, because you've all got apps on your phone, haven't you? Yeah, you've all got calculator apps. Before we had phones, we had calculators. Yeah, they were, again, coming in when I was just at school still. There are some on there that I owned. But, thing of the past. And then that's our BBC classroom. Anybody used a BBC Micro? Oh, jolly good. Yeah. So when we get schools come in, we get them to do a bit of basic programming on those, probably programming a Snake game or something like that. We've got printed sheets for them to work from. But there's three sides of the room. And they're actually now e-connected. So we've got a network between them with a file server and a print server on it. That's the NPL gallery. That covers the early work that NPL did, the National Physical Laboratories, in packet switching. Before the internet, before IP came along, they were doing packet switching. And then just before you leave the museum, every good museum has a little shop at the end, where of course you can buy a cup of tea or a sandwich or a t-shirt or a book or whatever. Right, so quick whistle stop tour of the museum complete. Tick. All right, now we have to see if I can get this presentation to work again. Helps if I use the right mouse. Slideshow. I'll put the first one. Will it come up? Yes, jolly good. Right, so the 803. You saw a picture of it earlier. it has quite an interesting history, which I only learned in the last year, the first part of it. Elliott's built 803s and they sold about 200 of them. They were stopped building them and selling them in about 1965. However, this machine, our machine, was still installed at Elliott's in 1967. So it was either being used as a bureau machine, so you could rent it out by the hour, or it was possibly an engineering machine, a test machine when they were fixing faults on boards. So in 1967, this chap Andrew, I can't spell Andrew, it said Adrian this morning and I spotted it and changed it, but I didn't spell it right. So Andrew St. Johnston had been the 803 production line manager. And when he retired from Elliott's in 1967, he was actually given this machine, which, considering they're worth about £40,000, was quite a gift. Yeah. And he then installed it, or I should say they installed it, because he and his wife ran this company called Warm Programming Services, who were a software house. They were one of the first software houses in the UK, third-party software houses. And so they installed it at VPS to support their customers for a few years. And then when they'd finished with it, they put it in a barn. Because obviously Andrew had an association with them. In fact, Dina, his wife, did as well, because she'd been a programmer on 803s. So they didn't throw it away. It sat in their barn for 15 years until we were starting up at TNMOC. And Andrew came along to a meeting. I can't spell place either, can I? He came along to a meeting in the CCS in London and said, "Oh, would you like to restore my 803?" And the rest is history. We restored it. Luckily, with the help of a chap who had previously been trained as a field service engineer on them in the 1960s. So he knew how to fix them. Right, just excuse me for a moment. Oh, it's close. There we go. So, first designed in about 1958, 57, first version went on sale in 58. It was then redesigned to be the 803B and went on sale in 1960. So we're at the transition between first generation computers and second generation computers. So it is a transitional machine in that internally, architecturally, Elliott stuck with the first generation design because they had experience. They'd been building systems called the 400s, built out of valves. Now, when you build a computer out of valves, you try to minimize the number of valves because they're unreliable, they're hot, they're expensive. You know, they've got a heated filament in like an incandescent light bulb, which eventually burns out. This is what's happening on EDSAT. So Elliott stuck with that design because they were going to implement it with transistors, which were new still. They were still new. Nobody knew the long-term aging on transistors because they hadn't been around long enough. So their thought was, well, if we build it the way we've always built them, we will maximize the reliability. Turns out they ended up with a very reliable machine because the transistors, in fact, didn't age much at all. And the fact that they took a conservative design on made them even more reliable. I mean, the machine at the museum is 60 years old. There's 2,000 transistors in it. None of them are working as well as they were 60 years ago. They're all still working well enough. Yeah, so it still works. And then the other bit of second generation technology was core stores. First generation machines were typically mercury delay lines. The original EDSAT was a mercury, had a thing called a coffin full of mercury tubes full of mercury, which you sent ultrasonic signals along. The rebuild of EDSAT is actually using liquid delay lines because having large amounts of mercury in the museum these days is not good. So the other bit of second generation technology the 803 uses is core stores. And we've got a picture of the core store later on. So that's the internal architecture. I don't expect you to be able to read it. But the thing about that is if you covered up 803 block diagram at the bottom, and I hadn't seen it before, I would say that's a first generation, probably valve computer, because that's what the architecture is. You can see it's recognizable. You've got store at the top, control, arithmetic, input on that side, output on that side. It's the classic 5-box design of computer. So I said they used a conservative design criteria. They only used the transistors to do amplification. They didn't actually do the logical function. The AND and the OR wasn't done by the transistor. That was done by a ferrite core. We'll look at that in a minute. And also the transistors were overdriven. So they're actually saturating, which meant that if the gain did drop over time, they were still going to get a full-sized output out of it. And again, that's one of the other things that has kept the machine running. And it uses pulses rather than voltage levels. So those of you that done any hardware, you'll be used to probably 3.3 volt logics. Yeah, I was brought up on 5 volt. Yeah, but this doesn't use voltage, it uses current pulses. And that's because of the early computers' origins in radar, where you were, if you got an echo back, that was a pulse and you needed to preserve that pulse. So they designed lots of circuitry for processing pulses rather than voltage level. First generation machines are serial logic. They only process 1 bit at a time. So you appreciate in your 64-bit x86 64 processor, all 64 bits are processed together. So if you do an add, you present 2 64-bit numbers and you get a 65-bit number at the same time. All bits appear together. Okay, there's propagation and carrier ripple. But in a first generation serial machine, you only process 1 bit at a time. So your bits are now separated in time rather than in space. So rather than having 64 wires, you have 64 time slots, and you put 1 bit into each time slot. That way you can process 1 bit at a time, which means in the case of the 803, you only need 1 adder rather than 39 adders. So your machine is 39 times smaller, but it's 39 times slower. But everybody was doing it that way, so it didn't matter. It's only when people started building parallel computers, suddenly serial machines look very slow. So we reduce the size, but the trade-off is that we reduce the speed. And I said the ones and zeros are the presence or absence of a current pulse in a time slot. So the pulses are about 2 microseconds long and the slot's 3 microseconds. And then there are 96-bit times, which are divided into 48 alpha and 48 beta. Now I said it's the 39, it says 39 of the 48 are used. So the first few gives you time to read a value out of the core store, and the few at the end give you time to write the value back in again. And actually, the core store is a parallel device, so all the bits come out the core store at once. So there's actually a significant amount of the logic in the machine is actually taken, converting parallel to serial and serial to parallel to go in and out of the store. As I said, pulse is not level, so you get circuits like this that have got transformers in them. Yeah, you don't see transformers in logic these days, do you? But they're pulses, so pulses go through transformers. Excellent. This thing is called a blocking oscillator. You can see there's 2 inputs on the left labeled digit and enable. So the digit has a pulse on it in one of those 96 time slots. And if the enable is on, which is actually -10, when that pulse comes, you always get a full-sized output pulse. That circuit cannot generate either a small or a short pulse, which is the difficulty in going between a voltage level and a current pulse. If your voltage level changed halfway through, you might get a short pulse, which would then play havoc later on. So that guarantees, it's like a monostate. Yeah, what happens, it's actually an oscillator, blocking oscillator, but that diode D2, if you can see it, that one there, that allows the oscillation to go 1 cycle and then damps it. So it's that 1 cycle is always full size. And then elsewhere we get flip-flops to do other things. So that's the logic gate. Very simple. As I said, the transistors are just used as amplifiers. The ferrite ring is about, I think it's 2 millimeters in diameter with a 1 millimeter hole in the middle, something like that. Very, very fine windings. You've got the 3 input windings down the left-hand side. And depending on the direction of the magnetism, be it clockwise or anti-clockwise within that core, is the representation of a 1 or a 0. And it's like a clocked flip-flop. So you can set it by putting a pulse on A, C, or E, and that will set the magnetism, let's say, from my point of view, to clockwise as being a 1. And then sometime later, you come along and trigger it, which resets it back to a 0. And if it flips from the 1 to the 0, you get a little negative output at pulse point J, which turns the transistors on and gives you your output pulse. Now, actually, the pulse at point J is only about 1 microsecond long. But you get enough electrons come out of that winding to saturate the transistors. And they actually go into, it's not hole storage, it must be electron storage. So they actually make the pulse longer. Now, in an amplifier, that's really bad. I mean, that's, you know, an amplifier should maintain the shape of the waveform. So it's actually a deficiency in the transistor. It's a bad characteristic that is relied upon to make the machine work. So the fact that these are all germanium transistors, if you put silicon transistors in there, which are much better, much faster, it doesn't work because it doesn't stretch the pulses anymore. And we can do other things. If we had an input on A and an input on D, we can now do A and not D, because D will try and write the 0 at the same time A is trying to write a 1. Now, I don't know how good your Boolean algebra is, but you can't build a computer out of just OR gates. You either need an AND gate or an inverter. And in fact, you can do both with this, because if we set A to be 1, we just get not D out. Yeah, and if we've got not D, we can feed not D into this, and then we get A and not D. A and D, woohoo! We can build a computer. Yeah. That is a full adder. You notice the 2 pairs of cross-coupled gates? They're exclusive OR gates. A half adder. Put 2 half adders and the carry generation in at the bottom, you've got a full adder. So you've got 2 numbers coming in here, one along the bottom and one down one of those 2 inputs at the top. Least significant bit first comes through there. The number that comes out the end is the sum. Yep. That's actually used for doing address modification. It's part of that bit there in the middle. Yeah. What you see here is a circulation. Comes along the bottom, up the side, across, up, round. Everything flows around as a bit stream. That path is actually, it's a half-length path. That path is 24 bits long. That one actually goes around twice, when everything else goes around once. But that's the instruction register. So you've got the latches down the left-hand side that store the opcode. You've got latches along the bottom that store the address part, and it's doing an instruction fetch. And those of you that remember, they are yay big diagrams. And there's a book full of them. There's the core store. Each plane is 64 by 64 cores, all made by hand, threaded together by women who used to work in the lace industry. One of the manufacturers was in Nottingham. I don't know how good your history is, your industrial history is, but Nottingham used to be the centre of the UK lace industry. And at the point that that was becoming mechanised, these came along, so the women got employed to build core stores instead. So 64 by 64, which is boom. Oh, come on.
396?
No. 4,096. Prize goes to the gentleman in the front. Yeah, so they're 4K bits on a plane, 40 planes stacked on top of each other, which gives you 39 data bits, because that's the word length, and 1 parity bit, which was enough. It was sufficiently reliable that that would protect you against, obviously, odd numbers of bit faults, because it's only 1 parity bit. So we've got a 39-bit word, integers between a big number and a negative big number plus 1. The multiply and divide instructions from the machine think they're dealing with fixed point fractions. So the binary point is at the top end. You've got the sign bit at the top, then the implicit binary point, and then the fractional part. So the next bit down is a half, quarter, eighth, 16th, all the way down to, it's either 2 to the minus 38. I think it's 2 to the minus 38, isn't it? Yeah. So the fixed point fraction ranges not quite to 1, down to -1. Or we can have a floating point number, which with 39 bits is actually better than a float. This float's 32 bits, so it's actually more accurate than doing math with a float, but not as good as a double, obviously. Or we can put 2 instructions in a word. That means that in terms of code space, the machine is a 16K machine, nearly, but it's 8K of data. So you've got 8K of data or a mix of data and code, 16K of code, 8K of data. Right. And that'll be a short break. Well, I've got to start the machine up. Right, so we're going to do a bit of programming. So there were a set of tools provided by Elliot. How are we doing for time, by the way? Because I've not been looking at the clock. Oh, what's that, right? So there were 3 main tools provided by Elliot. There was a set of machine code subroutines. If you have a few minutes at the end, there's a book over here that's got some examples in. So you've got a manual page, and then you've got a program listing, which is the gentleman at the front here will approve is all numeric. So there wasn't a symbolic assembler or anything approaching an assembler. More like a loader, this program called T2. Yeah, so we've got, I'll talk a bit about the instruction format at the end, but there's no labels there, are there? There's no symbol, there's no opcode, it's all purely numeric. And there were some simple debugging tools, so you could set breakpoints, print the accumulator, and stuff like that. But machine code programming is tedious. So the next thing that came along was autocode. So autocode was a fairly generic name for early compiled languages. So most of the big machines of that era and slightly later would have had an autocode. Things like Mercury autocode, Atlas autocode on some of the bigger machines that came along later. And then sort of the crown of the jewel really was the Algol 60 compiler, which came along towards the end of the life of the 803. I think the first release was in 63, I think. We'll talk a bit about that in a minute. And then there was some other third-party tools. There's this thing called Hcode, which I'll show you in a minute or two, which came from Brush Electrical Engineering in Loughborough. Language H came from NCR. Elliot's had a marketing agreement with NCR. So they ported language H, which was a COBOL-like language for doing business stuff, you know, customer handling and customer records and stock control and payroll and stuff like that. So as I said, not a symbolic, 2 instructions in each word, which you've just looked at. Octal opcodes, 6-bit opcodes, 2 octal numbers. 13-bit decimal addresses, and a B modifier bit, which is either written as a colon or a slash, which you use for doing address modification, or a decimal, octal, or floating point constant. So an instruction, that's a typical instruction, 30. So 0,4 says the first instruction, first word of block 4. So you could have numbered blocks, but it didn't do any memory allocation for you or didn't do any range checking or anything. You literally had to write at the top, block 1 starts at location 100, block 2 starts at location 305. And if you ran it out, it didn't detect it. So this is why I call it a loader rather than an assembler. So 30,0,4 says load the accumulator from the first location of block 4. 2,4 says add it into location 1 of block 4. And then that's just an example of a decimal constant. So we move on to autocode. Only simple arithmetic statements. So you could write A equals B plus C, but you couldn't write A equals B plus C plus D. You had to break it down because that translates into 1 machine code instruction. Well, the add does. So you've got to load the accumulator and add and store. Interestingly, although the machine supports integer division, you know, I said it did the multipliers and divides are actually in terms of fixed point fractions. So the fact is, when you do a divide and you get a double length result, the least significant bit is 2 to the minus 77, which is neither here nor there. Yeah, it doesn't matter if that's right or not. And in fact, depending on the signs of the divisor and the dividend, that bottom bit might be wrong. Now, that's not a problem when you're doing, fixed point fractions, but when you're doing integers, suddenly your answer is plus or minus 1, which is not good. You can get round it. You just have to look at the signs of the divisors and dividends beforehand and possibly invert one of them and not, then you get the right answer. They didn't do that in autocode. Their solution was, we just don't support integer division. I was at a meeting at the CSS once. The chap came up to me and says, oh, you do the 803, don't you? I said, yes. He said, oh, the machine that can't divide. What? So I then went home and actually looked at it and said, oh, I see what you mean. Anyway, so the sort of libraries, the maths functions come out of, said they're providing a set of machine code library functions. So they're included in autocode. It has this wonderful jump concept. It says jump if. It actually says jump at 3 if such and such. 3 being a numeric label. But it also has a jump unless, which is obviously the opposite case. But rather than use the word not, they used unless. And then we've got 2 types of loop, vary and cycle, which allows you to say things like, this is the start value, this is the step, and I want you to go around this many times. I think that's vary. You can't remember. Cycle is I think one you say how many steps and how size, and the other one says what you want the terminating value to be. And obviously it's got things for reading and printing numbers, and printing simple bits of text for doing titles on tabular output. Right, Algol 60. Read that bottom quote. That's a quote from this chap, Tony Hoare. Who's heard of Tony Hoare? Yes, excellent. Yes. Went on to write Quicksort, developed Quicksort, and communicating sequential processes and those other bits of stuff to do with provably correct programming when he was at Oxford. He was a professor at Oxford. Here is a language so far ahead of its time that it was not only an improvement on its predecessors, but also on nearly all of its successors. One of its main successors was Pascal. Anybody come across Pascal? Yeah, Delphi, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So block structuring and scope of variables was the big sort of thing that Algol introduced. Up till then, it had all been pretty much spaghetti code. But proper block structuring, parameter passing, return values, Boolean data types, multi-dimensional arrays with a bounds checking, which actually makes it very slow. And Elliott's also provided one of the things that the actual specification for Algol doesn't specify how you read and print numbers, which sounds a bit odd, but I'll explain why in a moment. But Elliott's provided quite a flexible set of facilities for doing that. The reason they didn't specify the input-output is because things like ASCII had not been standardized. Pretty much every computer manufacturer had their own coding for characters. So the 803 only uses 5 whole paper tape. So there's only 26 letters and 26 numeric symbols. Take away the 10 digits, you're down to 16. You take away plus, minus, subtract, divide, point, comma, open close brackets, pound sign. Yeah, you're in the 1960s. Pound signs. Now, that quote about the 1960s is wrong. There's actually a library routine that prints the number in the accumulator as pounds, shillings, and pence. Yeah. So we've got pound sign, question mark. I can't remember what the others are, but you run out. Algol needs about 96 characters. There aren't that many, but the spec allowed for dialects. So in the Algol case, we haven't got semicolon example as the thing for the end of lines, and I'm being very careful there. So it uses apostrophe. How are we going to do strings? Pound signs and question marks. Yeah. How are we going to do less than? LESS. Yeah, so you actually expand, the missing symbols tend to get expanded out into words. And the original and the revised report are available. and the actual 803 manual is also online. Now, what I will say at this point is if anybody wants to have a go at writing some algol and sends me their code, we can do this one of two ways. I can put a copy of an emulator up somewhere. If you've got a Linux box, I can put an emulator up, fast emulator that will compile your code and tell you whether it works or not. I will then be the judge, jury, and executioner, and whoever I deem to have written the best piece of code will be invited down to the museum for a day to come and run their code on the real machine and write some more code and do stuff like that. Does that sound fun? Yeah, okay. Jolly good, we'll do that then. So let's have a look at this. Who's heard of this? Oh yeah, you know what this is. This is the thing. If you go and look at this, there's a Veritasium YouTube video on this, and he starts up and says, this is the thing that young mathematicians get told never to mention, never to say, oh, I'm looking at the collapse conjecture, because you'll get laughed out. Yeah, it's actually very simple. There's the conjecture. It basically says that for any starting value of n, if you iterate round that, if it's even, you divide it by 2, and if it's odd, you multiply it by 3 and add 1. The conjecture says you will always get to 1. So far, there's no way of proving that. The maths just doesn't exist. Of course, every number that anybody's ever tried, it's always happened. But you don't know whether or not that number plus 1 is going to, unless you try it. So it's purely experimental. But it makes a fun little bit of code. So there's a procedure in algol. Integer procedure collapse. Takes one parameter n. Value n says we're passing the value in rather than passing it by name. We're passing it by value. For loop for steps equals 0. The slight odd for loop because it's got an initializer. So steps become 0, then steps becomes steps plus 1, while n is greater than 1. And then I've cheated there because there's no easy way of working out whether a number's odd or even in algol. So I've actually dropped into machine code this Elliott statement. Says load the accumulator from mask, which has got 1 in it, or it with n, and put the value into odd. Yeah, and Elliott's provided this because sometimes address calculations, for example, you can code up much more efficiently in a few words of machine code than you could do in compiled code. So it was actually there for optimization. And then you just say if odd equals 1, then n becomes 3n plus 1, else n becomes n divided by 2. Now, you remember I very carefully said when I mentioned apostrophes and semicolons, there seem to be some missing apostrophes. But there aren't, because the apostrophe is actually the statement separator, not a statement terminator. And it gets very subtle in things like if statements, because if you put an apostrophe after 3n plus 1, you would then be separating that from the next statement. So the apostrophe comes at the end of the else. Yeah, that catches me out time and time again. And the other fun one is that apostrophe, you see where it says collapse equals steps. If you miss that apostrophe out, it wouldn't be a syntax error. However, the line collapse becomes equals steps, apostrophe, would become a comment. Yeah. Why is this bit of code not running? Why is this value not changing? Ah, missing apostrophe error. And that's just a bit of code that goes after it to run it. Yeah. We read a couple of numbers. M equals 1 step 1 until count, and then call collapse. And then we print start the same line. Then we go on to the next value. Yeah. Right. We now need an 803. So there may now be a slight pause. Just if I tap on the wrong keyboard. Let's just look at this to start with. H code. Again, I said I mentioned came from Brush. Many years ago, I met DC Hogg, the chap that wrote it, Dr. Hogg, and that was his rationale for doing it. Algol was too big and too slow, and autocode wasn't flexible. And they designed big electrical motors for trains and buses and traction engines and things, and big transformers for substations and power stations. And in 1972, they donated that machine to the grammar school, which is where I was. and we got the HCode compiler and the Algol compiler. That's why there's still HCode and Algol around today, because I kept the tapes. Yeah, and I still use HCode. It's my favorite language on the 803. And then there were some other things like PRSP, which a friend of mine wrote, Peter wrote, which is basically a prototype CAD system for doing drawings. So we used to do drawings for sort of, I wrote a package that drew atomic symbols, you know, electron orbits and stuff and things like that. And then a friend of mine, Ian, who actually went on to write Autoroute, is now very, very rich. Bastard. He actually did some early mapping. We've got maps of England drawn on the plotter that he did. No, I do him down, actually, very nice chap. Now owns what he claims to be the world's smartest house. Anyway, there we go. I think that's probably it. Right, excellent. So now then, what we need to find now is 803. How are we doing for time, by the way? Yeah, that's super. Oops. Wrong glasses on, so I can't see what I'm typing. Right, here we go. Here's an 803. Yeah. I've now got to navigate my way to the on switch, which is over there on the wall. I'm going to turn that on. Come back over here. I don't know, can you hear that? There are button noises when I press things. Now then, the paper tape reader doesn't work, so I have to use the piece of software that I use on the real machine. Where am I going? Oops. Right, so this is a piece of software that I actually use to talk to the real machine as well. So we can get this right. Right, I've deliberately upped the font size for you. Yeah, so there's our Algol program. Yeah. We come back to the emulator. And hopefully the Algol compiler is already installed. So I put it in there this morning. Jump to location 7, where the compiler starts. Yeah. You ready? Why did nothing happen? Because I forgot to press upload to reader. Oh no, upload from. There we go. It's not very loud, is it? But that's actually the processor running. And you can see it's quite slow. You can actually see it parsing and thinking about the different statements. Can we get that louder? Is there a button I could press over here or something? Oh, there we go. That's better. Wrong mouse. Right, so now we have to tell it to continue. Is that wrong? At the top here. Oh, where's it gone? It's actually punching the result. I've moved it up so. See. Now it's finished. Where's the divide? Oh, there it is. Look, end of program. Right. Let's run that again so you can actually see it. So if we jump to location 6, recorded off a real machine. Oh, now then, right, okay, so it now wants to read some tape. So I now need to move this back. There, click load at cursor. So it said start at 20 and do 10 of them. "27 takes a lot longer than yeah, in the program. There you go. So that's a bit of algol. I've now got the same thing written in Hcode with the last thing to show you. What I need to do now is load the Hcode compiler. So there's no operating system. It's all bare metal. So this is starting to bootstrap. And that's actually an 8-hole tape, more than the 5-hole tape. Right, need to find the program. Excuse me, I have to change my glasses. I can't see what I'm looking at.
I wish every time that I load in my computer,
Where's that gone? Oh no, it was. Hcode collapse. There we go. Right, so this is the Hcode version. You'll see Hcode is not in. Let me turn that down before it annoys anybody. You can see Hcode looks almost like machine code. That's because it actually produces much better code than Algol does. Excuse my code. You've got declarations, CLTZ. You've got 4-letter function names, single-letter variables, A to Z, but each one is an array. So define collapse. You're going to read a couple of numbers. We're then going to do loop. So you've got do to repeat. It should be repeat, but again, it only reads 4 letters, so you don't want to type unnecessary letters, so you've got to repeat there. And we've then got another loop. N1 # is assignment. So N1 goes to N, 0 goes to S. We then go into a loop. It's got similar bit of machine code for testing whether or not it's odd or even. Puts the answer in a variable called O. So if O is 0, then N divided by 2 goes to N, else 3N plus 1 goes to N. Interestingly, arithmetic statements are evaluated purely left to right. No precedence of operators. Makes the compiler simpler, faster. So we then go 1 on S, which adds 1 to S. If N greater than 1, repeat, which takes us back up to the loop, blah, 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 blah. Then it prints N1 colon 3 prints N1 to 3 digits, and then prints S to 3 digits. Then loop, then does the outer loop. Right, so use the right mouse will help. Upload from editor. Back over here. This time we need to jump to 512, which I can't see on there. 4K, 8K, 4K, 2K, 1K. I'll take a guess that that's 512. Yes, looks about right. Actually, what I could do, of course, it's you could make sure that that's 512. Oh yes, it is. That's all right then. Oh, turn the volume down. Much quicker to compile. Let's start with 100. I might start at 20. Anyway, as you can see, it's much quicker. In fact, I've got an Algol program that takes 36 hours to run. We've never seen the result come out of the real machine until last week. When I rewrote the Algol program in HCode. And it now takes 4 hours. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that's been interesting. Any questions? Yes.
In the collapse example you showed, the program delved into a bit of machine code.
Yes.
So do non-Elliott languages also support that sort of?
Well, so obviously HCode does, which was a non-Elliott language. I doubt language H did, because that was all sort of COBOL-y business type stuff. You wouldn't have needed it. There were some other languages. There was a thing called Cecil, which I think implemented. There was a British standard language for teaching. I can't remember whether or not Cecil was it, but it was like an autocode, very simple. So I don't think that would have supported machine code. No. It's almost like an ASM statement. You remember when C compilers you could do ASM and put blocks of machine code in? It's kind of like that, but at the machine code level of the 803. And the nice thing about this in Hcode, so that 2 comma actually says jump to location 2 of this block. Well, there isn't a location 2. So it actually jumps to the start of the if. Yeah, and you can have blocks of machine code in integer variables. So you can take a library function out of the library, plunk it straight into an Hcode program and call it. So there's lots of nice things you can do like that as well. And we've got plotter packages. So I didn't really show you much of the plot. Are we at time? I've had enough. I'm sure you have.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we're at time. Okay. So we've got a plotter. We've got a digital incremental plotter, 1100 steps across, as many as you like around the drum. So we can draw pictures on that, which those of you that visited will remember. There's a picture of a very dodgy looking character on the wall with a big white beard. And lots of other mathematical stuff. But if you want to have a go at this and you want to do some graphical stuff on the plotter, I'll include instructions on the plotter package, and I'll stick a link on the Discord somewhere. I'll put a page up, and then you can have a look at it and have a play with it. Yeah. Now the other thing is, I don't know what you want to do with these, but our very kind museum director gave me a couple of goodies. So there's a bomb book, some bomb mints, I believe. That's possibly a T-shirt in there. There's a mug there, and is that the Enigma book? I can't remember. Yeah. So do with those as you like. They're there for you. Perhaps the committee can take them away and offer them as prizes for something.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't eat the mints. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. That's been fun. Jolly good. Just in case you're wondering, this is a Raspberry Pi, but I'm not running the Raspbian front end. This is native Wayfire on Wayland. Sorry? Oh, yes, sure, sure.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for everyone for coming, and a big thank you to all the speakers who gave talks today. Can we give all 3 of them one more round of applause for the ones that are here? And what we should do.
I think there is another thing.
Well, yeah, that's what I think. They, yeah.
Yeah.
Either run it as some sort of practice type, or do it as a box type of position.
I don't think let's do it for like
I'm only thinking of the one who already thought of it.
well no, but it's
Well, maybe a ramble or something.
Yeah.
Or even barbecue. Should we always just raffle at the barbecue?
say we always do. This one last year because we had lots of stuff to do.
We can only do half and half.
We do one
All right, that's good.
Remember to take my desktop.
Very portable.
Yeah.
I have a question.